Joe Rogan Podcast. Check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Hello, George.
Hey,
Hello,
Joe.
Jermey. What's up? Good to see you guys.
Hey, man.
The two musketeers at the front lines of UFO disclosure.
It is scary if that's true, Joe.
I think you guys are. I mean, you're certainly prominent.
Can I get the mic turned up on this bad boy?
Yeah, there's a little thing right
Oh,
there.
shit.
You could hear your own voice. There's a volume knob right there. There we go.
Excellent.
We're up.
It's exciting times.
It is. It's very exciting times.
I've said it a few times that I never thought I would see it in my life. You know, I would just keep plugging away this is my 36th year doing this, chasing this crazy story. I never thought it would make this much progress. Still a long way to go, but
Are you apprehensive at all that some of the stuff that they're releasing is bullshit?
Of course.
Of
wait,
course.
Wait, who's releasing?
I mean, when you see these, the Pentagon's talking about it, when, you know, intelligent officials, you ever wonder whether or not it's disinformation?
Yeah. You want to?
Yeah,
go ahead.
So, yeah, I'll take that first. Yeah, I've heard you kind of talk about that a bunch,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it's a very healthy suspicion to have. My perspective is a little different in that people are always coming at me with fake information, like every day, all the time. But the people in government that we have been able to kind of interface with, I wish there was an adult in the room. I wish that this was orchestrated through the media. It would give me some sort of hope that someone has some sort of control on this, and that has not been my experience.
Okay, what is your experience? Like, what's your impression of how it's all happening?
It's a big question. I don't know where to start on that, but here's what I know. I know that there are people in government that want some level of disclosure on whatever this is without defining it. Just there should be oversight. So I know that to be true. There are good people that think that people are running amok and there must be oversight, not just financially, but if these types of technologies actually exist.
Right, who's in control of them and why? And
Yeah.
who has access to them and why?
I mean, we have a history of disinformation and misinformation put out to the public and to Congress by the intelligence community, by the Pentagon. They lie all the time. It's part of the turf. It's part of the job. But for them to then go into closed-door briefings with members of Congress, with the oversight committees who handle their budgets, for them to lie about that, that's another matter. And I don't think they would because they could get busted for it. A lot of stuff is coming out now, and I know we get asked all the time, who's behind this push? You know, it looks like it's one big movement as opposed to a bunch of different things that all happened in approximately the same time. It's kind of been organic. Different people have come forward, and it encourages other people to come forward as opposed to somebody doing a master manipulation of the whole thing.
What resistance is there to this information getting out?
There's resistance on like multiple levels. So despite what you believe to be true or not true, the big question is, are we going to be able to verify some of these claims? That's all I care about, right? If we're back engineering some of these craft, then I believe that we should have the discovery process to find out if things like what David Grush has said under oath, that he has literally put his well-being and his safety on the line for, if that is true, then we have a duty to find out. So the pushback comes from many levels. There's stigma. It's fucking huge, dude. Like it is political toxicity for some of these senators to even, you know, people don't want to know, they don't want me to say I ever talk with them. It's like a toxic environment politically, the UFO thing.
Because everybody thinks it's bullshit, or you're a loon if you believe it. But not everybody, but quite a few people.
Not just that, it doesn't help you get reelected, man.
Right.
And then when you start poking the bear and going into the oversight committees and the Senate Intelligence Committee and the, you know, all these things, they're like, whoa, this is our territory. Why are you, as Congress, pushing on us? Why are you doing that? Like, this is our job. We have clearances. So there's that kind of pushback too.
You look back at the beginning of the cover-up, you know, why did it happen? Why did it start? Well, if 1947, this gigantic wave of UFOs suddenly appear. You got Kenneth Arnold, you got Roswell, hundreds of sightings all over. We'd just come out of World War II, and our military is faced with a new threat that they really don't know what the hell it is. They start looking at it and try to figure it out, but they can't. So they sort of painted themselves into a corner of secrecy. Nobody wants to admit, if you're a president or chairman of the Joint Chiefs, there's something flying in our atmosphere, and we can't control it. We can't even catch it. We can't detect it on radar. There's not much we can do. They don't want to admit that. Secondly, I think what was told to me by a Senate intelligence guy who was a chief staffer who oversaw black budget operations. He had come out to Area 51 looking into the Lazar stuff years ago, early 90s. And he told me, look, if this is true, if this cover-up is going on, if they are diverting millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars from legitimate national security programs to keep this cover-up going, as he suspected there were, then somebody's going to go to prison. When it comes out, they'd go to prison. I think we heard Dave Grush speaking before this House committee in late July, in which he talked about special access programs, hundreds of millions of dollars being funneled into them. Nothing ever comes out. Congress has no oversight. Congress doesn't even know they exist. That's the kind of thing you could send somebody to prison if and when it comes out. And then the final reason, we can only speculate about it, maybe there really is a big secret. I wonder about it. If I was told, here's the real deal, here's what's going to happen if this comes out, society will collapse. It is so overwhelming, so disturbing that it would hit the fan, that everybody'd freak out. Maybe there is something like that. I don't know. But it gets dangerous for us to allow military folks to decide, I can know it, but you can't. Dad can know, but mom and the kids can't know. I don't like that.
Yeah,
I'd like to be able to know myself.
I don't like it either, but why do they think that society would collapse?
There was a Brookings Institute study that was done in 1960 where they looked at it. And, let's say it was confirmed that we came out and admitted that extraterrestrials are here. And they speculated, in looking at sociological matters, that social institutions would collapse. Do people want to still pay their taxes? Do they want to go to work? It was so overwhelming. The fact that we, a lesser species, have been discovered by something more intelligent. We know from human history how that works out. When the Europeans come to North America, we know what happens to the people who are already here, the less developed society. They collapse. They were wiped out. And I think that was the projection of that study. The only way to get around that, they said, is to prepare for it over a long period of time, to condition folks to get ready for it. Now, I don't know if there was ever a policy where they instituted that, but it kind of looks like it. All the UFO and alien movies and TV shows and X-Files this and books and reports and children's cartoons, it almost looks like we've been conditioned to get ready for it over the last 60 years.
When people talk about the possibility of these being some sort of black ops creation by the Defense Department, some sort of weapons grade drone that moves at insane speeds with some unknown technology that they've developed in secrecy, that kind of falls apart when you go back to 47. If you go back to 47 and you're seeing these vehicles that are behaving in a very similar way, or at least described in a very similar way, where they just jet off at insane rates of speed, no visible means of propulsion, no sound, that's the one thing that brings me back. Like, God, they seem to act the same. At least some of them do. They seem to be, and if we're talking about 1947, we can really safely assume that they did not have drone technology capable of, super hypersonic speeds at that time.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that is a big part of the issue here. Is like people can just say, oh, this is really special projects that are even being hidden by our own government. The thing is, the UFO phenomenon has been ubiquitous. It's been everywhere in the world, and it's been going on before 1947. So somebody had that technology. Now, I do hope we've had some sort of ability to get derivative technologies. I know they've been trying to do that if we believe the core concept that we have craft that's more advanced than ours that we're trying to reverse engineer. So the fact you bring that up, and I want to touch on what you just said, the explanation I've been given, we've both been given, is that there are true national security concerns about this technology, that the cover-up or whatever, that it has to do with what will happen if we make a breakthrough in this technology, and that can be weaponized. So the secrecy, you could say, some people have tried to convince us that there's real, true national security issues with this, in that once you admit one thing, those next questions are going to come. And maybe we can't answer those yet. We don't know. So that's the fear, is like, it's like the Oppenheimer movie. Like, shit's been kept pretty secret, but stuff has come out. It's like, what happens if we admit the fundamental truth that there are craft of unknown origin that are more advanced technologically than ours? Doesn't matter where they're from. What happens if we admit that? So people are concerned, from my opinion, within government, that if they let that out, the follow-up, they're not going to be able to deal with.
This technology has been seen throughout human history, on every continent, in every culture, for as far back as humans have been around. That is not our technology that was flying around pre-1947. Look, Dave Fravor was here in this chair, Joe, talking to you, and he talked about the Tic Tac incident from 2004 as he testified before Congress in late July. We didn't have that technology then to do what the Tic Tac did. We don't have it now. We don't have it. If you look back at the paper trail, this is what got me hooked on this topic in the begin with. I can't go out and find UFOs. I don't know the cosmic meaning of all this stuff, but there is a paper trail within our government, documents, memos, reports that were generated by the Department of Defense before the Freedom of Information Act existed, before they had to worry about the public ever seeing these reports. Those documents paint a pretty clear picture. General Nathan Twining, who became Chief of the Air Force, he was also the first Air Force guy to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He wrote this document in 1947, the Twining Memo, where he talks about these things are not fictitious or imaginary. They're real, and they're not ours. And we don't think they're the Russians either. It's not our technology. We wish we had it.
I'm sorry. How did he describe it?
It's not fictitious or imaginary. It's real.
But how did he describe the crafts, or how they behave?
Metallic. They can appear and disappear. We can't detect them on our sensors, whatever, I think it was radar back then, that they can outfly our best planes, fly circles around us. There's nothing we can do about them. We have no defense mechanism against them. And then there's the paper trail starts there. There was a study by the FBI and the U.S. Army in 1948. Then the CIA, after it was created, got involved. They've been studying this stuff for a long time, and the documents where they speak to each other, very frankly, this is real. It's not us. As the 1960, they put out a memo saying this is serious business. We need to figure this out. I think there are inescapable national security implications for this technology. There is a race for it. We're trying to get it. The Russians are trying to get it. The Chinese are trying to get it. Whoever gets it, they win.
Are there some sort of reports about the Russians and the Chinese also having recovered crafts?
Dude, he smuggled a ton of classified documents out of Russia himself during Glasnost and Perestroika. He went and met with the heads of the UFO programs in Russia during that time period. He came back with all those documents and actually supplied them to some people. Like that happened.
It had a lot to do with Harry Reid's decision to go ahead and support funding. Because those documents show that the Russians are trying to do what we're trying to do, which is to take this stuff apart and figure out how it works.
And what year was this?
This is 1993, the first time I went. But their study lasted, they had the biggest study in the history of the world. From 78 to 88, the USSR sent out an order to every military unit in the vast Soviet Empire that any UFO, any orb, any ball of light, anything weird in the sky, all has to be investigated. And that information had to be funneled to the Ministry of Defense, to the desk of a guy named Colonel Boris Sokolov, who was in charge of this program. And I met him, and he shared a lot of that information with me. And he admitted, we're trying to figure this stuff out because if we could duplicate that technology, we could kick your ass in terms of stealth. We could beat you at your own game on stealth technology. So they were trying to do it. They're trying to figure it out. We hear bits and pieces that they have recovered crashes as well. So do the Chinese, maybe the Israelis.
I mean, also in these documents. And can you tell them who you gave them to? That whole stuff. Can you tell them that?
They got into the hands of the U.S. government, and then that was after I came back from Russia the first time. I went back again in '96. A lot of the people who had been willing to talk to me during Glasnost were now afraid. They would not meet with me. The people who had gone on camera changed their tunes because the whole country had changed in that time period. But the documents also went to OSAP. That's the program that the DIA ran. Bigelow was the contractor for it. And they hired a bunch of Russians to go through those documents, figure out the structure of the Russian UFO program and did a lot more analysis than I could do just by myself.
And in these documents, they talked about shoot-down attempts, which is something that we'll be hearing more about over the next 15 weeks, I hope. So in Russia, they had this policy at first to engage these things, and they lost pilots.
Yeah, they had 40 different incidents during that study where Russian warplanes chased UFOs. 3 of those cases, the UFOs turned around and shot them down. They disabled the planes, and the planes crashed. 2 of those pilots died. And after the 3rd crash, the Russian Ministry of Defense put out the order, leave them alone. Yeah. They may have, quote, incredible capacities for retaliation. Just leave them alone.
And one last thing about that blew my mind. We did an episode about this, like him going to Russia, the whole thing. They talked about in those documents that they knew how many satellites that we had dedicated to looking for UFOs. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I met this Russian scientist who had worked on their version of Star Wars. He lived in one of these secret cities. He'd never spoken to any journalist, let alone a Western journalist. And he started telling us about the work that they were doing. He showed me this tabletop model of a laser weapon that he called the weapon of the aliens. But he said he'd been involved in the Russian space program in the earliest days. They had satellites up there that were seeing these things coming in and out of space into Earth's atmosphere and going out. He said the Americans, I know that you guys had those satellites. You were seeing the same stuff we were. Their intelligence agents got information from the U.S. They knew we were collecting information back then. They know we're collecting it now.
And when they said that they had jets shot down, do we have instances of jets getting shot down in America?
We do. It's kind of sketchy because a lot of those records, we have records of the planes going down, but there's no indication that the UFOs were responsible other than the Captain Mantell incident. It's a pretty famous UFO case where he chased a UFO and then crashed. I think he might have run out of gas. And I think the Air Force tried to explain he was chasing the planet Venus, which is preposterous, you know. Yeah, we have some. Yeah.
The CIA actually fully funded a movie narrated by Rod Serling.
Oh, wow.
It's called UFOs Past, Present, or Future. And there's 2 versions, and you can find it online. This is the most incredible UFO movie of all time because it's funded by the CIA to try to apologize for that incident of saying he chased Venus. It's a cool old school documentary on UFOs narrated by the Twilight Zone guy.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. Fact.
So the Russians, how many crafts supposedly Grush said that the United States is in possession of 12?
We should back up on Grush, right? Like,
okay.
What I'm thinking is something big happened. We had these hearings, right? And everybody knows Grush because they saw him for the first time during that. In those hearings, he did not say that. And so there's an important thing there of what he said and what he couldn't say during those hearings. So I'm not going to say that Grush has ever said that. That's not in his DOPSR. Like, that's not authorized shit. If somebody said that, I don't know who said it. All we know he said was right there in that hearing.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? It's like there's a lot of rumors out there, and I don't know.
So this 12
You've heard it from
vehicles,
people, and
yes.
I've heard it from people,
Yeah.
not from Grush, though. you know?
Okay, so I'm confused. So what has Grush said? Grush said they definitely have physical crafts?
So he was really... So let me just set the scene for you with this hearing thing, right? So I know when people think this is like orchestrated, man, we fought for every millimeter of doing that hearing. Like I personally did, you know, and so did George. And the idea was, what can we put out to the public and let everybody know this is important to us? It's the first time in history that you have Commander David Fravor, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, and then one whistleblower, a guy named David Grush, who we can't validate what he said because it's all classified information. But Commander Fravor, friends of ours, you know, Commander Fravor, he just told what happened to him. He chased a UFO. Then you've got Ryan Graves, who his whole squadron has been seeing these things. You've had both on your podcast. But Grush stood up there, and he was very careful with his words, and I want people to know why. If you look at that setting, you're going to see right behind him was a guy named Chuck McCullough. Chuck McCullough is the former Intelligence Community Inspector General, so like the cops of the intelligence community. And he was right behind David Grush, who is his client. So he's representing David Grush because David Grush put a whistleblower complaint. Yeah, and look at those two handsome guys right there. So there's, this is the biggest conspiracy photo of all time. Can you imagine people seeing this and being like, what are those idiots doing up there with him? But so behind
Look at that
David,
dude with the beard and the glasses in the back. He looks so happy.
yeah, dude, he's so
UFOs.
People think that guy with the bald head is James Clapper. By the way, I got a bunch of
it wasn't.
like a bunch of comments that Clapper was looking at my notes during that.
So I
Who
got
is that guy?
I don't know.
He's just part of Ryan's organization But here's the deal, man. This photo is kind of hilarious because George had ontological shock when we were in that room. It's like he's sitting there. He's sitting there seeing, after all this time, this shit's being said out loud. So what happened was the seats were kind of like designated for us because George and I were supposed to testify, by the way. But then common wisdom says, why have these journalist guys when you can hear directly from the first-hand people? And when we agreed.
Yeah.
But what we did was we put on congressional record statements, and people should read them if they haven't. They're on congressional record. I did an assessment of kind of the estimate of the situation on UFOs, but he named names and programs. But what you're seeing there is, and I kind of had to fight for this, is getting his lawyer behind him should be like an obvious fucking thing when a guy's going up to testify under oath in front of Congress. If you believe him, he's speaking under whistleblower protection. Dude, it was hard to get his lawyer behind him. I had literally had to put the lawyer behind him. So we got the lawyer behind him so he could lean in and be like, careful, Dave, careful, which he did like a bunch of times. Mm-hmm. And then there's George looking all scrunched, and everybody's like, why Jermey over there with no one next to him? I think people are a little afraid of me because, a little bit of a maniac sometimes. Whatever. We're there. Dave starts talking. They ask him questions. These weren't pre-scripted or anything. We're talking about what could be asked for sure, but they weren't pre-scripted. What Dave Grush said, and correct me or add to if I get this wrong, Dave Grush said, I did an investigation. It was my job. I was hired by, and this is a guy from the National Reconnaissance Office, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Like, this guy he's been in the intelligence community a long time. And he sits there under oath and he says, I did an investigation. I interviewed, it was my job to look at over 2,000 special access programs, like black programs. And it was my job to find out if any of them had to do with UAP and if there's any money being hidden, like misappropriated, theft. And he's like, after interviewing 40 witnesses, I found a ton of shit that supports this. And in fact, he said, I found people who worked on the craft firsthand. And they had to come in, or they willingly came in. He called them hostile and non-hostile witnesses. And he's like, so I did that whole thing. The second I did that, which was my job, I was given the job, reprisals started happening to me. So he smartly did a whistleblower complaint through the Presidential Protection Act 19 or something. He got the head of the ICIG, the former head of the ICIG was a lawyer, and he says, fuck, dude, here's what I know. Here's what people don't know, is the ICIG, so the intelligence community, did their own investigation into David Grush's witnesses. And what he found, they interviewed like 40 plus under oath and immediately said, David Grush's claim is both credible and urgent. So it's not like just one guy telling you. Our intelligence community did a deep dive investigation into what David Grush told them under oath in the right secure settings, and they're like credible, urgent. So David Grush can tell you the basic things that happened, but you know how he kept saying, in the appropriate environment, if you've got clearance, we can do that. I'm willing to give you a list of hostile and non-hostile people that worked on the craft. Biologicals, he even said. He's like, I'll give that to you today. We just got to get a skiff, and we got to make sure that you have access, you have clearance. And he was denied a skiff that day.
He's a credible guy. He's the real deal. I mean, he had a career in the Air Force, served in Afghanistan, a distinguished career. Then he goes into the intelligence community, working for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He was assigned by his boss to be the liaison to the UAP task force. That's what Congress had set it up to investigate the whole UFO matter before the current program existed. And the guy who was in charge of the task force, Jay Stratton, gave him a job. Go find the special access programs that are hiding UFO stuff, either siphoning millions of dollars, or they've got technology, crash retrievals, reverse engineering, all the stuff that we've always heard rumored, and he did. He found it. Most of the juiciest stuff that he found, he can't say in an unclassified setting. It has to be because they will get him. They will bust his ass if they can. They've already tried.
Like 4 times, and that's something offline we'll talk about. There have been attempts to get him silenced, unmuzzled, by the way, to not do podcasts or shows and stuff, right? To get him muzzled by people that are trying to say he's talking outside of his Dopser, which is like what he's allowed to talk about. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for one word that he says that's outside of that. Like I get asked by people in the government, has he ever told you the number of crashes? Has he ever told you locations? Like, I'm going to fucking answer you, first of all. Second of all, no, he hasn't. Because that would be illegal if it were to be true.
So he is authorized to talk about a very limited number of things. Is that correct?
And they're not vouching for their authenticity. Dopser process, which is, I don't know what it stands for, but it's like a pre-pub process. He very smartly, because his lawyer is really smart, former ICIG, he's like, write it in what you want to talk about and see what they come back about what you can't talk about. So they're not saying what he's saying is true. They're just saying you can talk within these parameters. I would like to see if what he's saying is true. So we just need that option.
So who gives him the authority to talk about these things?
No one gives him the authority. He's taking that all on himself. He's a true whistleblower, whether you believe his claims or not. What he's doing is legal, but it's a career killer, right? Dopser says they go through it and they make sure that things that are like highly sensitive are classified, right? Like you can't say this word or this program or this name. So they kind of do it as a pre-publication thing. That's the process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I wrote a book with Colin Kelleher and Jim Lakatsky about the DIA's UFO program. It took Dopser 14 months to approve our manuscript. So they take their time.
They take their time.
Line.
But also when you get pushback where people are trying to entrap him or get people to say that he said something out of school, the Dopser people are like, no, he's fine. Like he's talked within those parameters. He just has to be careful to not accidentally say something that is outside of those parameters. And right now is a very sensitive time for that. Immediately?
It's interesting. We met him in Huntsville, Alabama at a conference, the SCU conference. It's a UFO event. We went down there to interview somebody else and to get him on camera. And we had been told there's a guy might introduce himself. And Jermey was shooting video of me sitting at a bar at the moment that this guy walked up and introduced himself. So he had that moment on camera. And then we got to know him a little bit. A couple months later, he comes out to Las Vegas. There was a Star Trek convention. We were going to speak at it. And he comes out because he likes Star Trek, like everybody likes Star Trek, comes out and spends 2 days with us. The next day, he flies back Sunday night. Monday morning, he reports to work. Armed security guards escort him out. He was suspended. His clearance was suspended. We were worried, oh, Christ, was he seen in our company and that's what happened? But that was the beginning of his first real big trial by fire. They accused him of a bunch of stuff. And said that they were going to fire him and permanently suspend his clearance.
And was he already discussing UFOs at that time?
Not with us, but he had already been investigating it on behalf of the UAP task force, and he had shared information through the whistleblower process with the Inspector General.
Yeah, let me just break it down real simple. So here he is. He gets this job. He's looking at all these special access programs. He's a fucking brilliant guy. He's a physicist, by the way. He's a brilliant guy in general. So he discovers all this shit. He starts getting reprisals. And then the moment George is talking about, I kind of had heard about him. All of a sudden, he comes up to him at this bar where we were at. That's the first time that he talked to anybody outside of government. Now, he didn't share anything he shouldn't, but he was kind of coming to George and then to me to say, I'm doing this whistleblower thing. I am concerned for my safety and just in general for my career. He wanted a journalist or journalists to know, not to report on it. So imagine that. We don't even break the story that we had before anybody, right? So what I did, because I'm his harpoon, I did a deep dive into this guy for months and months and months. He actually came to my home, met my family, and I got to know him, and we vetted and vetted. Okay, this guy is who he says he is. He's 100% who he says he is. So we kind of got that layer of trust. This is not some sham or something like that. But then what happens is what George was talking about, the second trip. So I'm already talking at this Star Trek thing because my friend growing up from my jiu-jitsu class was Rod Roddenberry. So he's like the son of Gene Roddenberry. So he's just like, dude, Jeremy, come talk to a bunch of Trekkies about real UFOs. And I'm like, cool, I'll do it. It's in George's hometown. So that was a great opportunity for Dave to come and meet with us again and just talk to us, right? Yeah. And then that Monday when he gets back, he's walked out of the Geospatial Intelligence Agency or NRO, depending on which one you want to identify him with. He's out, man. And they did some bullshit on him, like time card. Like out of 12,000 billable hours, maybe there's like 30 hours somewhere where you didn't do it right. They were doing anything they could to fuck with this guy. So that was our first like heads up. Oh, dude, how this guy gets treated is going to dictate everybody else that has come to us in private saying, I think this is illegal, what I'm doing.
Right.
Among the complaints they issued to try to take away his security clearance was that he had mental health issues.
Yeah.
So he was suspended for a couple of months. They did a background investigation of his allegations, the allegations that had been made against him, and they cleared him, reinstated his security clearance. He stayed on the job for a couple more months and then retired because he sees the handwriting on the wall, and he left. And that's when he started plotting the next chapter. And now we're seeing the backlash process firing up once again. After he testifies in front of Congress in that hearing and offers to tell them more in a classified setting and spill all the beans, they got to find a media guy to go after him. This article in The Intercept.
The Intercept did a smash piece. By the way, we already knew all about Dave Gresh's PTSD. And at the time, his best friend, one of his dear friends, just got off the phone with him, blew his own brains out, right? So he was like drinking. He was in a bad place. The first day one, I talked to him. I said, what dirt are they going to pull up on you? If what you're telling me is true, they're going to get some dirt. And he goes, look, man, I had PTSD. I dealt with it. I survived it. Nothing horrible happened. But, he told us day one, man, that Intercept thing was some bullshit. They come in and they try to discredit what he said because of his PTSD shit. And the thing is, that happened to Lazar. Like, if you believe or don't believe, don't care. That did happen to Lazar, too, where people try to discredit his character to try to minimize what he's telling you. So we saw that with Dave. And that was only the visible stuff. I'm telling you, things behind the scenes that have been done to Dave and his family, it's disgusting. Like, not even just like pull your clearance kind of shit. Like, there are people that don't want him. He's an embarrassment, to the Department of Defense. If what he's saying, he's coming out of school and he's saying, I saw some BS. Like, they don't want that.
So we are in a pushback phase. They not only the intelligence community and military folks tipped off a reporter and said, go look for this. And they found some police records of where he was drinking too much and was suicidal. And that was adjudicated. It was looked at. The Department of Defense, his employers looked into it. He'd gone through treatment. He got past it. He was a better person, a stronger person for it. But they leaked that information to besmirch his character. And now we see additional pushback in Congress. So this committee that held this hearing into UAP matters was a subcommittee on national security of the Oversight Committee, the larger committee. Since that hearing happened, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee got together with the chairman of the Oversight Committee and decided no more UFO hearings in the House. Enough of that bullshit. We're not doing that anymore because, in their words, it could be an embarrassment to the Department of Defense. You're damn right it would be an embarrassment for what's going to come out.
I mean, it was a big success, to have this publicly done. It's the first time in history that we have direct witnesses, like 2 pilots and then a whistleblower. It was the first time in history. We fought for every millimeter of that territory to get that to happen. It was not received well by the intelligence community. They did not like that happened. And that's pretty telling to me that we should do it again.
Now, when Grush first found out about this stuff, he was tasked with trying to uncover it.
It was his job.
It was his job. And why did they, what was the suspicion? What was the initial impetus to get him to look into this stuff?
It's the suspicion we've had for a long time. that there is a crash retrieval program, that we have recovered technology that is not made here, that we're trying to reverse engineer it and figure out how it works so that we can duplicate it.
Right, but who sent him?
So there's a
UAP task force. So the UAP task force was formally created by Congress to look into the bigger picture.
and
Jay
they
Stratton,
suspected that something was wrong.
Yeah. Jay Stratton was the head of it. He'd been at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was with Naval Intelligence. He kept getting pulled back into the UFO arena from different jobs. Very credible guy. He was in charge of the UAP task force. He put together this amazing briefing document that included film and video and photos of UFOs that have been gathered by the U.S. military over the past 30 years. He'd give those presentations to Congress, to the Joint Chiefs, to defense contractors, because he wanted people to know about it. And as part of that job, he assigned Dave to look into special access programs. Can you find evidence of crash retrievals, reverse engineering, any of that stuff we've been hearing rumored for 30, 40 years?
And this is really about oversight, okay? So the way I understand it from people involved is that, look, we have to have oversight over these types of programs and technologies. Like, it's good we're doing them. It's good we keep it secret. Like, that's their standpoint. But they're like, we have to have a process of oversight. Do you remember the church committee back in 60s? Was it 60s, 70s?
70s.
So the church committee, everybody in the intelligence agency that I know will say there's BC and AC, before the church committee, after the church committee. It basically was a way to level the playing field so there's not this type of, shenanigans that are going on, the fucked up shit they learned from the church committee. So what they're saying now is, look, some stuff needs to be kept secret for national security. If we can turn some of this shit into weapon systems, right? Like, we don't give out blueprints to make an atom bomb. We admit atom bombs are real, but we don't give out blueprints. So some of it needs to be kept secret. But they're all about oversight. If you don't have communication between these subcontractors that are working on this exotic stuff, if it exists, we need to be aware of that at some level. We meaning Senate and Senate Intelligence Committee, all this stuff, oversight. So without that oversight, you're just letting people run amok and go crazy with this stuff. And I'll tell you firsthand, right? There are people that have come to me and George that are currently employed in agencies, and they feel like they are being held hostage in these programs. Like, there's ways to keep people in programs and to not let them out by dangling this, like, well, what are you going to do if you lose your clearances? You're going to go work at Home Depot? That's the way that I've heard some people describe to me and George of why they're so terrified right now, is because their whole lives, their wives, their dogs, their children, are all dependent upon these little faction groups kind of keeping them in a program. If that's true, that's fucking horrible.
And what just happened to Dave Grush, the sliming of Dave Grush by this really pretty poorly researched article, is an example to all them. Anybody out there who's a whistleblower, you're thinking of coming forward and spilling the beans, this could happen to you. Did you ever have an affair? Did you ever have an out-of-wedlock kid? Did you have a drug problem? Because whatever it is, we'll find it, and it'll come out.
It's interesting that they would use PTSD to discredit him for a war veteran.
I know.
That seems insane. You're shaming someone for seeking help from something that most soldiers come back and have to deal with. That's really insane.
It's low, is what it is.
Well, it doesn't make sense either. It just doesn't make sense. Like, how can you do that? It doesn't make sense in terms of the reader's perception. Because I think most readers are going to look at that and go, well, the guy came back from war and he sought help. How many guys come back from war and they're fine? Isn't it? It's probably less.
And
Probably quite a bit less.
And a lot of people never get over the
Yes.
PTSD and they take their lives.
The number of veterans that take their lives in this country is astonishing.
It's 4 times as many that die in combat.
It's astonishing. It's
And
terrifying.
Thank you for vocalizing that, because to me, I'm like, what the fuck? But
That's just some fucking egghead writer
Yep.
who has an agenda. But it's also, there's this natural inclination that I think we all have to poke holes in something that seems fantastic. It's like, this guy, what is he doing? He's coming out. He's a whistleblower. Has he seen these things? Oh, he just he works for the UAP task force and he's uncovering this. Like, what else? What do we know about this guy? Oh, he's nuts.
Yeah.
Oh, he has PTSD. He was suicidal. He's making things up. He's unstable. Instantly, you could sort of dismiss.
And I understand if I was watching this in 2D reality and I'm just watching the TV and I'm seeing these weird guys behind here and I'm thinking this is a setup. Like I do see that, and I do see that. Why would you take this seriously? But if you're in our shoes, mine and George's, and you see this kind of go through and you talk with people on a daily basis, people come to you over years, you vet them. Man, look, from where I'm standing in the 3D version of this, I wish it was more organized. I feel like we're fighting, like pushing that. What's that dude that pushes the boulder up the hill that keeps rolling down on you?
Sisyphus?
Yeah, some Greek. Yeah, that's what it feels like, right? Like one step forward, two steps back. I think we made a lot of progress, but I see how it looks so bizarre on the outside. But I will say for sure, Dave is who he says he is. He had the job that he says he did have, and he absolutely fundamentally believes that what he uncovered is non-human technologies, and he said that. And I believe that we have the right and the need to try to do discovery on that. And the only way we're going to do that is if people say, we want to know. And the hearings help with that kind of thing.
Now, this stuff, I would imagine, is very compartmentalized. So I would also imagine there's probably some people in government that, whether it's because of their ego or whether it's because of whatever position they have, that they need to have access to this information or they want to have access to information. Do we know who does and who doesn't?
You want to go then me?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Short answer is kinda. Like we kind of know, who has control of some of these programs now. George and I have never found somebody that knows the totality of it, but we have been, as he likes to say, pretty high up the food chain. So we get to a point where we get to people that have actively worked in what they call the legacy UFO program or programs. So these are like the actual UFO programs that are not public. And when we get to people in that position, the brick wall for us is always this. They're like, I'm not for disclosure. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me to stop then. What do you mean? The public, you shouldn't kick a sleeping dog is one of the things we were told. And I'm like, well, what? Like, what is so freaking scary that the public would know something that even though we're friends now and you have direct knowledge that you, first of all, won't testify to Congress. We got no's. No way am I doing that. And I'm like, why? There's something. We keep getting up to that point where there's something and we don't know what it is. And maybe it's just they want to keep Gollum's ring. They don't want anybody else to have control of this shit. Or there's something they're not telling us that is so gnarly that they don't think people can handle it.
There are, different scenarios you could explore. For example, you ask, what could be so terrible that they can't tell us about it? Let's say these aliens, wherever they're from, made us, that we're a genetic experiment, that they created our religions, our religious figures, that we are an agricultural product, that somehow they harvest us, that our time is limited, that once the experiment's over, poof, we go away. I remember when there was a push back to have a designer universe, intelligent design universe in the schools, and I wrote a column about it, just said, hey, be careful what you wish for, because you might find out that the intelligent designer isn't God that you're thinking of. It might be some alien science project or something like that. You can imagine a lot of different things that would be really disturbing to people to come out. I don't know if that's the reason for the secrecy. I suspect it has a lot more to do with national security, us not wanting Russians and Chinese to know how far down the road we are.
We know that to be true.
We've been told that you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies.
It's probably a multi-layered reason.
Yeah. I just don't know the top layer. It's killing me.
Well, it's interesting because how would they know the top layer? I mean, what kind of confirmation would you have to have that we were genetically engineered? Like how much data would you have to have before you accepted that?
So you got compartmentalization, you said, right? So I know a guy in the 70s that was working at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. He's not ready to break from the fold yet, right? He's not ready to do it. but he was working on supercapacitors in the 70s or something. And he said something like, I know the 3 companies that make these. He was given a device with no markings on it, no nothing, and he was to reverse engineer it. He is convinced this was not made by us. It was so efficient, almost 100% efficient. So you get people like that.
What was it?
Like a supercapacitor, is that the word for it?
Superconductor?
Superconductor. So it was just some device that he was, as an electro kind of specialist, was working on. But this is just a one-off story to give you an example.
What exactly is a superconductor?
I don't know, dude. That's what Google's for.
Yeah.
I wish I was smart.
Superconductivity would allow the transfer of energy at, like, they're trying to get
Here
it
it
at low
is.
temperatures.
Right.
This means an electric current can flow, but the electrons are jostled around a bit as they move, so they lose energy as they travel. This jostling is called electrical resistance. In a superconductor, there is zero resistance, and an electrical current can flow perfectly smoothly without losing any energy.
That sounds right.
And so this is something that apparently... So this was something that was just discussed like recently about a superconductor at room temperature, but it was
right.
kind of debunked.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Oh,
I believe
dude,
it was
I saw that in the
debunked.
news. Yeah.
Was it debunked?
It's
I
been
don't know.
debunked a couple of times. They keep taking another stab at it.
It's like Chinese propaganda or something.
No, I think they couldn't replicate it or find out what it is.
That's as far. I think that's exactly it.
Yeah, they couldn't
replicate it?
Right.
So check it out, though. What I can say is, so I have 2 pieces of graphene, and they're like these little squares. And one is they're metamaterials, meaning it doesn't occur in nature. We made them. I have 2 kinds, 2 pieces. One piece is a 3-degree variation from perfect atomic layering. The other one is like a 7-degree variation from perfect atomic layering. So like graphite from a pencil, I think, and they layer the atoms perfect. The one that's 7-degree and the one that's 3-degree, if you have an ice cube, and I take the 7-degree of orientation off from perfect and I push it into an ice cube, it's like a hot knife through butter. It instantly gets cold, and your finger gets cold, and it stops in the ice, right? Because it's transferring the heat. I guess this is a superconductor, I think. It pushes the heat from my fingers right in. So that material has unique principles and properties because of the way they atomically layered it. Mm-hmm. The 3-degree one, it goes much deeper and faster because it's like a faster transaction of that heat. So we've learned that metamaterials, when we orient them, we make them in a certain way. They have special or unique properties. So back to this guy. A lot of what it seems like we're doing is trying to get derivative technologies from something that's more advanced than what we have. And they could be little things. So all he saw was a superconductor, okay? I believe that's the right word. That's all he saw. He only has suspicion. It's never been put to market since the 70s. What the fuck? He worked on one. So that's one type of, like, I don't know, whistleblower or witness that we got. But there are other types. There are other people that are like physically working on the machines. Then there's people that are just in a bureaucratic role. Then you've got people like David Grush who do discovery on finances and programs and interview people. This whole tapestry or mosaic of individuals leads me to feel that where there's smoke, there's fire. All of this, there's something to it. It's just, where is it from?
I think we're in kind of a pushback mode now, though. Since that hearing, that might have been the high water mark. Jeremy and I have been talking about it publicly for a while. The closer we get to the goodies, the closer the public gets or Congress gets to actually seeing the saucers or finding out where the programs are, the harder these guys are going to push back. The true keepers of the secrets have dug their feet in. I mentioned about this House chairman, Intelligence Committee chairman. He represents Wright-Patterson Air Base. That he gets a lot of campaign donations from big aerospace companies. Wright-Patterson, of course, home of Hangar 18 and all the rumors about Roswell wreckage and other things being stored there. That's his district. He's the guy that said no more hearings
Is
on
that
UFOs.
Representative Turner?
Turner, Mike Turner.
So he kind of put the kibosh on it.
It claims China is a bigger threat to U.S. than aliens. Okay.
Well, that's probably true. I mean, I don't know.
They're probably doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I would say that's
Do you
probably...
guys remember the American Computer Company? Do you know that story? No. The American Computer Company, I'm pretty sure that's the name of the company. American Computer Company had a whole section on their website about the back engineering of technology that came about from the Roswell crash and about how Bell Laboratories in New Jersey had an Air Force base right outside of it that was supposedly to protect New York City. They're like, but the problem is New York City's, you got to fly over to New York City. Like, it seems like it's protecting Bell Laboratories. And Bell Laboratories is where he said that they back-engineered all this shit, including fiber optics, including, like, the discovery of a bunch of different things that came out, supposedly, of back-engineering that wreckage. See if you can find that.
I mean, I hope that's true, dude. I hope that if we have...
Is this it?
I mean, well, this is the accuracy of what
Colonel
this is
Phil
from
Corso was
South
the guy who-
Shining
The
Morning
truth is
Post
out there, and so are the cranks.
from 2000.
That's true.
Yeah, it was is the company exist
I don't
anymore?
think so, but this is.
Okay. Don't believe everything you read online. American Computer Company. Its secret alien research have been around for 4 years. Jack Schulman, owner of American Computer Company, now operating as compamerica.com, posted a story to his website. He claimed that Bell Telephone Laboratories had stolen the idea for the silicone chip from the alien spacecraft that supposedly crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. Prior to Bell's announcement that year that John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley had invented the transistor, computing had depended on vacuum tubes. So why is it that 50 years on, we can't use the aliens' technology to violate the theory of relativity to travel beyond light speed? Well, that's a big jump. It seems that a cartel of technology companies and oil producers have colluded to prevent the development of high-speed chips. Mr. Schulman posts his theories at roswellinternet.com, where he also claims to have invented PCs and Windows and to be working on a chip. That seems weird. Working on a chip that will run at 12 terahertz, 1,000 times the speeds of today's fastest CPUs. One way you can guess the veracity of web rumor is the writer's typing style. If an author randomly switches to uppercase for effect, then he's probably a crank.
That's the only thing I could really find just right now. That even
That's
brings that up.
a fucking half-hearted attempt to dispute what he said.
There's a guy named Phil Corso who was an Army colonel. He worked in this technology office in the Pentagon, and he's the guy who came out with a book on the 50th anniversary of Roswell. He said, I saw that stuff. We had it in a couple of file cabinets, and he personally took it to Bell Labs, claims to have given them the chips that inspired the later work. A lot of people don't find him credible, that he takes too much credit for doing all kinds of other things in history. But I met him before his book came out years ago, and Bigelow and Hal Puthoff and those guys went back to see him, and Jacques Vallée, and they thought he was credible. They didn't necessarily believe everything he said, but it goes right along lines of what you're saying there.
And so what did he describe that he saw in those file cabinets?
He said fiber optics, computer chips, among other things. I think he said night vision was inspired by something they got out of those chips. Out of those ships.
I have no idea. It's like it would be so cool it would be so cool if we had success in derivative technologies and they were in our hands. I think I would like to believe we're more responsible with that shit. I know for a fact that, and George can attest to this, that the UFO topic is taken at the level of above weapons of mass destruction within our government, within government agencies. Like, they take it that seriously. So that is not a throwaway statement. I'm telling you, I know that. And George can attest to it, right? So here's the deal, man. If that's true, then I do understand the perspective. Whoever gets the technology first wins. But my understanding is that we have not been able to duplicate the core technologies. And if that's true, because it's so far ahead of what we've got, what we can do is kind of like get derivative technologies. All you have to know is what the legislation that was put into the National Defense Authorization Act. I know that's not a word that normal people going to understand or hear about often, but I've become educated on it. So the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024, it ends up being signed, hopefully, by Biden. Any president has to sign it. And also the Intelligence Authorization Act. So the language that they put into these is all people need to know, because they wouldn't fabricate this out of thin air, and they wouldn't spend resources on creating this language if they didn't have more than a good suspicion that we have this kind of tech and that we're trying to reverse engineer it. It's online. Anybody can look at Schumer, I think, put out a big bill, and then there was an amendment to it. And if you read this language, they're like, any of these non-terrestrial craft, I mean, they are so thorough. They're like, if they're being hidden in private technology, we're cutting off your funding. So they've got a carrot and a stick approach. I've talked to some of the people that formed this language, right? So what they're saying is, the carrot is, if you come forward within, I think, 90 days, once it's signed, and you tell us that you have technologies that are not from here, then there'll be no penalty to you. If you don't tell us, your funding is cut. We're going to find out. Your funding is cut. So it's like a carrot and a stick kind of thing. If you read this language, it's almost insane to read, because they know that there are these programs. Now, where the craft or things that they're working on are from, how do we even get there to know that? I don't know. But they do know that we have this shit, these craft of unknown origin.
They use the term non-human intelligence in that legislation 26 times. I mean, it's astonishing. There's this Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, standing up there in a nod to his late mentor, Harry Reid, saying we're going to get to the bottom of this stuff, and it's real. And he acknowledges that that legislation was crafted with the White House's cooperation. So it's the Biden administration, somebody in that administration signed off on this. It's astonishing.
People don't like it, though. Like, if you're in the IC and you've got these like secret programs or if you're like, let's say with Lockheed, let's say you're Lockheed and you got some really cool thing, they might be looking to move it now, because I don't think they're really worried about funding being cut off. I think a lot of these black programs can be funded asymmetrically, like in different ways than getting money right from Congress. But I'll tell you, that language tells you everything, because it shows you that they are taking it so seriously that they have some sort of pre-knowledge that these programs exist. In fact, they probably know where these objects are being stored. Now, you said some number. You and I might talk to similar people, but definitely that number's floated around. I have no idea if that's the correct number. I just know that they have been told where these holding facilities are. They have been told. All they got to do is get the authority to go knock on that door and go inside.
What is the explanation of how we acquired these crafts? There's crash retrieval, but then there's also ones that are intact.
Remember, Lazar said that nearly all of the ones that he saw, except for one that had a big hole in the middle of it, all looked intact. It was as if they were dug up at archaeological sites, or there were gifts, like throwing a cell phone into a chimpanzee cage. Here you go, crazy humans, knock yourself out. Let's see how you do with this. That they're just left there for us to find, and as a challenge to us, I guess.
Yeah, I have the same problem as you. Like, I'm like, these motherfuckers not crashing. If they're coming from somewhere else, they're not crashing.
Right.
But people will say to me, look, man, we have airplane problems, and sometimes even planes crash, and maybe there's other circumstances where these things could have crashed because they were hit with some technology. Maybe two of them were dog fighting.
Electrical storms.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was the Virginia, Brazil story, right?
Yeah.
It was
Right.
an electrical storm.
And so
Also, radar. Some people suspect that really powerful radar can interfere
Right,
with them.
because some of the radars are also weaponry. That's the thing. Like, you can have energy reception, but also output on something. So there's some cool devices that actually shoot like high laser weaponry. But my thing is, I don't know if they really crashed. George is kind of edging towards maybe archaeological digs, maybe gifts.
Lazar said that one of them supposedly was from an archaeological dig, right?
Yeah.
Do they know where?
Not that I know of.
He
Does
was,
he know?
No, he was just literally, that's one of the many things that they tried to impose upon him. But remember, they tried to impose a lot of shit on Lazar. He is so succinct with, this is what I know to be real. I had hands on this. Now, they told him a whole bunch of crazy shit.
Like what?
Dude, just like, I should put that shit out. I'm just crazy. Like,
We
I'm
are
sorry.
we are viewed by the aliens as containers of souls.
I mean, you're not going to tell a guy working on propulsion that. So he was able to sit down for a brief time and go through a document, like a huge briefing document. In there, he saw they said was a biological biopsy of an alien. Like he didn't care. He was going to the propulsion part.
Mm-hmm.
But they told him so much wild stuff. He's like, this has to be a joke. But then when he said, he differentiates, he goes, but you can't fake, he said, what I saw. You can't fake your hands trying to get close to the reactor and not being able to touch it. You can't fake something that big lifting like that. So he says, I know for sure what I worked on was not from here. But he goes, everything else they told me, it was words on paper. And I respect that about him. And maybe they wanted him to leak it to John Lear. Remember, he's like friends with this guy, John Lear, who's like already on their radar. The best photo of Area 51 from lake level ever was 1977, the year I was born. John Lear's kicking it out there, stirring up shit at Area 51, taking photos. So he does a whole panoramic of photos of Area 51, sees a truck coming from a distance, being John Lear, takes the roll, puts it under his ashtray, puts in new film, snaps it again. They confiscate his film. But he had some underneath his cigarette lighter or whatever. And he actually gave those to me. So I got the best shot of Area 51 you'll ever see from lake level was by John Lear. Now, Bob knew John. That's where all the conspiracies come in, because John's like this UFO nut, the godfather of conspiracy. But when...
How did Bob meet John?
Well, this is your turf. Yeah.
Through a guy named Gene Huff, who was
This is post-exposure, post...
He met him before he worked out there.
Really?
There was a guy named Gene Huff who did a real estate appraisal for John Lear's house. And Gene was friends with Bob. And Gene and Lear struck up a conversation, brought Bob to meet him. And it was only after that Lazar got hired out there. He would have arguments with Lear about this crazy UFO stuff, because I'd already done a couple of interviews with him in the late 80s.
With Lear.
With Lear, before I met Lazar. So Lazar was not a believer. He said, I don't believe it. Poor John, he's crazy with this UFO stuff.
So this is fact, and it's so funny, like knowing all these guys, because I wasn't there like he was, but I get to talk with everybody and grill them. I think it was Jim Goodall that was in the car with him. He remembers Bob saying, oh, poor John Lear. And Jim Goodall is like, why? And he's like, because he believes this UFO nonsense. So that was where Lazar was at prior to getting the job out at the test site, is he didn't believe any of this nonsense. In fact, so much so that, remember, I think he told you when he first went in, they had a little decal of an American flag on the saucer, and he thought, oh, those idiots, everybody thought UFOs were from outer space and they're ours, you know?
Right.
And then he quickly realized, wait a second, that, you know, this can't be ours.
It's fascinating to see now that Dave Grush has come forward and give some credence to, we have reverse engineering programs, we have a crash retrieval program, aerospace companies are stashing this stuff in some hangar somewhere. All the stuff that Lazar said as being true, they now say, oh, gosh, I guess it is true. But that Lazar, he's still a liar. We don't believe him. You know, you have to kind of do some mental gymnastics to do that.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating when you see these crafts move exactly the way that he described them in 1989.
Yeah.
Straight up.
It's pretty wild, because you're seeing footage from, like, what is it, 2014 or something like
the
that?
gimbal. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, it moved exactly like he described. Turns on its side, shoots off.
So that's a common thing, is Bob Lazar must be the luckiest con man on planet Earth to get so much shit right over all these years.
What's that? What's the controlled disclosure campaign plan?
What is this from, Jeremy?
This is listed at the bottom of that document. They're talking about the NDAA for 2024, and this is the UAP section I've been reading through.
Controlled disclosure campaign with respect to unidentified anomalous phenomenon recorded records originated prior to review board termination.
It's this review board. I'm not sure what this is. It talks about all the, like, they get all of this information, and you better give it to them, is sort of what it says.
They want to set up a review board that would basically declassify stuff that they come across.
Yeah, but I'm being told by people involved that that's not good enough. Like, this is one step, which is to get this presidential review board, and you get a bunch of sociologists and scientists and some Nobel Prize winners, and you look at what can be declassified for the American public in a controlled way. And that's really nice they're doing it, but everybody on the inside that I know is like, we need a church-style committee. It's not okay to just have a disclosure panel. You need oversight. And to get that oversight, we need access. The only way that we're going to get that is by forcing where are all the senators in all of this? We did this hearing with all these Congress people. Where are all the senators listening to the public being like, okay, I'm going to get after that? They're the only ones with the power to create a church-style committee. Where are the senators right now? And so that's really, this language is so important. I hope people go look it up and they read it, because it's just astonishing when you hear what they're actually doing. And I think it's a good step.
I find this one a little weird too. The exercise of eminent domain.
Yeah.
They can go and take anything from
Yeah.
anyone who's got anything.
Yeah, look at
basically,
this. The federal government shall exercise eminent domain over any and all recovered technologies of unknown origin and biological evidence of non-human intelligence that may be controlled by private persons or entities in the interests of the public good. Wow.
Yeah, dude.
The fact that that is in that paper is crazy.
So it's not passed yet. So that's what. So they're going to debate this when they get back from what they call it recess now. Yeah. So it's really good that everybody hears this. This is going to be debated by your representatives. This needs to pass, or we're screwed. This has to pass, and then the president has to sign it.
It's important, too. You got to figure that if, say, Lockheed or one of these big aerospace companies really does have this stuff, it's incredibly valuable. I mean, it would be worth untold millions of dollars. The technology that could change the world forever. So they don't want to give it up, if not just for national security reasons, then because of the value of it, monetary value. So this would change that and take it. I mean, I guess it could apply to Element 115 if there's a piece of that laying around somewhere.
I don't know. I mean, actually, they did say private or corporate kind of. So it's like basically. So I am of two emotions about this. One is like, so the government gets to come in and take everything. Like that feels a little weird. But I do believe that the spirit of this is to get to the core of the question. Have we been reverse engineering technology not from here? And if we have been, there needs to be oversight. So I am for this, but this is not going to help the American and global public learn more. And that's the thing we have to remember. That's why Grush can't talk unless he's in a skiff with people with access. These people are not for what George and I are for, which is that we need to know the truth about this. I want to. I'm greedy with the truth about this. But this is not going to tell the American public the truth. What it's going to do is within the intelligence communities, it's going to inform everybody on a bigger scale, which means we could have better scientists on it. We could have better people working on it. I do hope that splashes over to the public, that we get to learn more about this, because I want to learn more about it.
Of course. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
It's just wild seeing that language.
Yeah.
It just does not seem like they would put something like that in there unless they knew something.
Yeah, exactly. This is Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader, who got up. He didn't just slip it into the bill. He made a big deal about it. He made an announcement, a speech on the floor, and emphasized that, having that non-human intelligence in that bill 26 times is astonishing. And the fact that he says the White House supported it shows how far we've come in a short period of time. I mean, I'd never saw that coming from Schumer. We knew that Marco Rubio and Kirsten Gillibrand in the Senate were into this issue, but did not see it from him.
Yeah, but where are they now? See,
Yeah.
right now, why is everybody being so damn quiet? The thing is, they need to fight in order for us. We need, one last time, we need in my opinion, we need like a church-style committee where we get more information to the public, because I want the public to know as much as they can.
Don't you think they're probably quiet until more information comes out? Like they're just kind of like waiting to see what becomes of this?
Who's waiting? Like the Senate?
Yeah.
Dude, the thing is that if I had a political career and 100 things that I'm dealing with, the public needs to tell our representatives what we want them to do. So are they kind of sitting back and being quiet? Maybe. I know Rubio came out and said, look, they're so careful of saying what they don't know. And I appreciate that. But he's like, look, I have been testified to, or people have come to me and our groups, and they've said that they're worried about their own well-being, that they have directly worked on these things. So he is being informed, and maybe they're being a little quiet, but now's the time for them to pass this through. They have to debate it and go for it, man. This is a big opportunity that we have now to get closer to this truth. It might happen, it might not.
The fascinating answer was the guy saying that it's not in the public's good for this to get out. God, I wish I knew rather what that meant. Because the big speculation, there's a bunch of big speculations, but the big one has always been that we were genetically engineered. I mean, that's something that Zecharia Sitchin talked about, and when he describing the Sumerian texts and those ancient clay tablets that show this very large, strange-looking humanoid with a humanoid on his lap that has a tail. It's very bizarre.
It's like Childhood's End. Have you read that book, Arthur C. Clarke?
No.
So how they acclimate the human society, if I remember the book properly, is they have all these motherships just hover all over the earth, and they sit there for generations, acclimating people to them, because the ETs or whatever, they've got a problem. The problem is they look like the fucking devil. Like forked tail.
Wow.
That was the book. I don't mean to give it away for people, but it was so crazy.
Oh, that's amazing.
So speculating right now, just speculating, because it's driving me crazy. What do you think, if this is true? We're just saying, if this is true, if we're being visited by something.
Yeah.
What could be so powerfully devastating that these keepers of the secrets have literally, all of them, pretty much stopped at the same place and talking with me and George, which is like, I am not for disclosure on this. There's something they're not telling us that is so heavy.
Well, it could be a bunch of things, right? It could be the fact that they do want to get control of the technology before enemies do. That makes sense. But it also could be the genetic engineering thing, because there's a weird thing with human beings and lower primates. The lower primates are all still around, and there was a bunch of different kinds of humans that didn't make it, Neanderthal and Denisovan, and there's a bunch of other ones that they keep discovering new ones. But, God, there's a giant leap between us and the other primates, a weird one, real weird. We vary so wildly in terms of how we look. We vary so wildly in the environments that we can live in. We have hyper intelligence in comparison to everything else that's on the planet, like giant leaps above in terms of our ability to manipulate our environment. We're not like anything else. And, the thing about when you look at us and you look at primates, you go, oh, yeah, we're similar. When you look at us and you look at chimps, you look at, bonobos and stuff, you're like, yeah, I guess humans are kind of similar to those in a little bit. Like you've watched Chimp Empire, that show on Netflix.
Yeah.
But, boy, big fucking difference, and they're still around. They're still around looking exactly the same. And we somehow or another advance to this very bizarre thing that flies around in metal tubes all over the planet and sends video through space. Well, we're so much different than them. And, they are our ancient ancestors, right? They're our ancient cousins. Like, what happened?
Would people freak out if that story came out? If
Yeah,
it was
I think they
confirmed?
would. Well, I think it would really throw a monkey wrench into religion for sure. You'd have to I think religion would probably adapt, and that this was also created by God, and these are messengers of God or something like that. They would probably come up with some sort of, if that turned out to be absolutely true. But the doubling of the human brain size over a period of 2 million years is the biggest mystery in the entire fossil record, apparently, and they don't know. There's a bunch of speculation, a lot of questions and guesses, and different things that we could have done that could have facilitated that, but that's a big one, man. That's a weird one.
So
it's
I got
weird.
a question about that, right? So this is something I'm struggling with. Like, could you tell the general public that the base understanding, that we're not alone, that there's some craft from somewhere else, we don't have to say from where, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell them, could you say that to the public officially in some way, and still avoid what they call strategic surprise, like this idea that we can work on it really well and make sure that we don't get strategically surprised by another nation. You could keep your security in place. Could you do all of that if you let the one thing out the box, if it was officially acknowledged that we're not alone? Or do you think people would just start going crazy for more answers? Because I think that's the fear of people. They can't just say one thing.
I think in today's day and age, with the news cycle that we have now, where things are just in the public eye, instantaneously, nothing sticks, everything keeps moving. There's scandals and wars constantly. I don't think it would register. I think people would have to have actual physical encounters with UFOs before it really made sense to them. Because I think right now it's just this idea. It's in the air. It's vapor. It's just like you could talk about it if you like. You could read about it if you'd like. You could watch blurry videos if you'd like. But it doesn't have any weight in your real world. Now, if we start seeing them, if they're like hovering over Los Angeles and they're undescribable and they rocket off into insane speeds and smaller crafts come out of the mothership, and if that kind of shit happens, that would get real weird. That would get real weird real quick, and that could lead to chaos. That could absolutely lead to chaos. And if we somehow or another had proof that, maybe we are some sort of a science project or some product of genetic engineering, or maybe the human farm thing is real, that they literally created us to try to get us to do things here or to try to recreate souls, which is like a very bizarre thought, that the soul is a thing that we carry around inside, and that there's some sort of value to having so many souls.
That's like, this is old school. This is my gateway drug into UFOs was John Lear. And first time I sit down with him, he's like, got this big cigar and he's looking at me and he's like, we're all property. We're property. I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? And he was talking about how the aliens saw us as kind of like a wine, and our bodies are containers and our souls are being matured as like a commodity. For these, like he was a wild dude. Like, I'm not saying I believe any of this. I'm just saying he gave me that idea day one.
When he said matured, like, is a soul of an intelligent person more valuable than the soul of a dummy?
I wish we could ask John Lear, but he's dead.
You know what I'm saying? What does that mean in terms of like aging our souls, maturing our souls?
Maybe through experience, like hardship experience, love, joy. Like maybe I'm just talking crazy right now, but this is I can do the John Lear. John would say every experience you have in life is what makes your soul mature. From your joy and your love to your hate and your anger, live without envy, hate, or greed. That's my John Lear impression. Yeah, he was
it makes sense. If your soul is ultimately a representation of who you are and how you stand in life, it would make sense that would be fortified by your life experiences, and it would make it stronger, like everything else. Like your life experiences make you wiser. If the soul's a real thing, the more value you put into the world, the better you behave, the nicer you are, the more you learn to be honest and truthful, all the different things that we hold up as high qualities for human beings. It would make sense that would like enrich your soul.
And just getting better in life, right? Like if for you 20 years ago and you today, we all hope that we look at our past self and we say we've learned something.
Sure.
We become a better person, become more loving, empathetic, better and more creative at presenting ourselves into the world and making a difference. So that's a cool way to look at life. That was his cosmology.
That's it's a fascinating idea, but what's terrifying is that if we're a commodity, then we're like beef cows that are eating all the grass that we want because it's valuable for them to get fat. That the chaos on this planet is actually engineered to ensure more rich souls.
You guys should talk about that.
Yeah,
he likes this.
I know some people that have been pretty far up the food chain that believe that there is mass manipulation of human affairs on a global scale for reasons that we can't understand.
And mass manipulation by humans or non-humans?
Non-humans. Manipulating humans by non-humans to do things that they want us to do. There are some
what
theories.
Kind of things specifically?
War, for example.
Really?
There's what's it called? The Gods of Eden. A guy named William Bramley, an attorney, sets out to write a book about the causes of war. And everywhere he goes throughout human history, he finds evidence of some kind of a exterior manipulation of human affairs, that they somehow benefit from us killing each other on a massive scale. William Bramley, Gods of Eden.
And what is the speculation? Like, what could it be that they would how would they benefit? Does he say?
Maybe it's souls. Maybe releasing souls so that they can recycle them. I don't know. It's been 25 years since I read that book, but it's worth a read. I look back at the earlier this year. We had 3 UFOs, I'm using air quotes, shot out of the sky by the U.S. military. That's the story that gets printed in newspapers. U.S. military shoots down 3 UFOs, one of them being a Chinese balloon or whatever the other ones were. But, you know, the public paid attention for, 2-3 days, and then it's like, hey, when's that new Barbie movie coming out? You know, and just moved right along from it.
Yeah, and that's that news cycle. It's pretty wild. But it's also, again, you can only hear about UFOs for and I'm a nut, obviously. Fucking look at this. I'm obviously a UFO nut.
We're friends here. You know?
I could only hear about it for so long before I'm going, I need something.
Yeah.
I need to see something. Show me some metal. Show me some hardware. Show me a fucking frozen being. Something. It just...
UFO fatigue, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is UFO.
I got it too.
I hear it all the time. I mean, when, don't tell me anymore. I don't want to hear about any whistleblowers or hearings until you show me the flying saucer and the dead alien bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. We get that all the time.
We got to keep going.
Of course, we do have to keep going. Well, you guys, George, when did you first break the Lazar story? Was that 89?
89.
And when you broke that story, was that your introduction to this world, or had you already had a curiosity?
I had done some stuff starting in 87. It was John Lear. John Lear had walked in the station with a stack of documents. He had helped us break the story of this secret plane out in the Nevada desert that was invisible to radar, the stealth fighter. And so he had some credibility with us, and he plopped those documents on the desk of my managing editor and my buddy and mentor, Ned Day. Ned, this is your next big story. It's the biggest story in history. Here you go. Ned looks at a couple of pages, shoves the file back across to Lear and said, this can't be true. If it was true, I'd already know about it. You know, he's kind of cocky, like many of us are. And so before Lear left the newsroom, I said, let me take a look at that stuff. So he gave me all these documents. Most of it was stuff from the Freedom of Information Act. You know, these agencies like the FBI and CIA, before FOIA was the law of the land, would deny that they ever did any studies that had any interest whatsoever in UFOs. Then when that was signed into law in the mid-'70s, they had to release thousands and thousands of pages that showed they'd been lying through their teeth, that they had been studying it. All these pages of information of studies and experts and panels and all kinds of things like that. So Lear gave me that stuff, and that's how I got hooked, is the paper trail that established that our military, our intelligence agencies were telling the public one thing. Don't worry your pretty little heads. Pay attention, move along, nothing to see here. But behind the scenes, they took it very seriously. They were very concerned about where these things were from and how this technology works and the fact that they can't do anything about it. So that's how I got hooked. In 87, I started reading about it. And then meeting Lazar in 89, almost by chance, and realized, all right, look, if I'm going to report on this, I got to really dig in and learn everything I can. And I was cocky enough to think, well, give me 6 months, I'll have this whole thing figured out. You know, that was 36 years ago.
Wow. It's got to be crazy to see it now in front of Congress.
I had a moment. I did.
Tell him.
I had a moment. I just kind of had to bow my head there when it came over me after all this time, seeing what was happening, unfolding in front of me. I just never thought I would see it. And what was really amazing is the partisan divide was gone suddenly. There is an issue that the two sides, far left, far right, can agree on. There's AOC and Jamie Raskin on one side of the room, and there's Tim Burchett and Matt Gaetz on the other, and they're all asking questions. And it's not just questions prepared by staff; they're doing follow-ups. They're into it. They're into it. It was amazing. It was just absolutely amazing to see it.
Have you heard any speculation as to why they want to hide the information? Have you heard anyone that says that this is why?
Yes. So to the best of my knowledge, directly to me so many times now I can't count, is strategic surprise, that we have to be ahead on this, that we know that Russia has a UFO exploitation program, reverse engineering. We know China has one. Like, if these were theirs, like, they wouldn't be having these huge programs that they've actually announced and bragged about in China. So it's strategic surprise. whatever we can derive from these technologies, we know that it can be weaponized. We know that it is so powerful just by the propulsion systems alone, how they move. They suspect it's gravitational. Just like Lazar said, the top dogs that we know that have worked on this problem set for our government believe by observation that these propulsion technologies are gravitationally based. With that said, it goes back to Lazar. We can't produce gravity. But what if there it was, he said, something that produces gravity. So if that is true, then they know that just even the laser weaponry technology that a colleague of mine and George actually did study for our government. I don't know how far I can go on that one, but that's true. That people are looking at unknown technologies and exploiting them for laser technology. That is factual stuff. He'll tell you more about it later. So, if we get left in the dust, everybody believes we're ahead right now in the secret little reverse engineering.
Why do they believe we're ahead?
Well, maybe it's hubris. I hope we're ahead. Everybody that I know and everybody that George knows believes that right now we are still ahead on these reverse engineering programs. So let's just couch this. Let's believe it for a second.
Okay.
We're reverse engineering UFOs.
Okay.
It has been conveyed to us in the most direct sense that we believe we are ahead right now. But the way China works, they could quickly get a quick advantage because they don't have the same restrictions that we have. They can control every piece of that program, no questions asked. We can't quite do that. So there's a fear that we're going to be left in the dust at some point and we'll have what they call strategic surprise. So that is a good reason that I understand that people want to keep this shit under wraps right now. I don't believe that if they said, look, you've been seeing them all through human history. We're now capturing them on multitudes of corroborative visual types of evidence, from thermal to radar. That's the big deal about what George and I released about the 2019 swarms. It's corroborative visual evidence, right? Now that we have all these sensors that are so cool, just tell people, whatever, we're not alone. Whoever these are from, maybe we don't know. I don't know that that's going to go over so well, but I feel like we should tell people that if we find out it to be true.
So most of the reason why they're withholding the information is not worried about the collapse of society. It's worried about having control of this technology.
Yeah. I believe so.
There's no way you can separate national security issues from this. The last time I was here, Joe, we talked about nuclear incidents where UFOs appear over nuclear missile facilities, missile bases. They disable those missiles. That's happened in our country. It's happened in Russia. I don't know if it's happened in China, but it's real. You could neutralize the entire nuclear arsenal with one of these machines. Now, that's real national security. It's so interesting that our government says, dismisses Project Blue Book because there's no threat to national security, and yet it clearly has national security implications if they can control our nuclear weapons. The friends of mine, as far up the food chain as I've gone, have said this: you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. You can't tell part of this story because no one would ever be satisfied with part of it. You can't be halfway pregnant,
So it's national security, and I can get with that. I get that. I understand that explanation. There's just a step further that I'm not understanding yet.
Yeah.
But I understand the national security.
What do you mean by a step further?
Like what we were talking about before, what is it that's so devastating? Because we get to that point with people sometimes. And what is it that's so devastating? They're okay with us reporting on stuff, as friends. They're I'm not going to inhibit you in any way. George and I are in a weird position. So, of course, people are always trying to trick us all the time, every day. Major good tricks. They would love us to fuck up.
Like CGI video.
Sure. How you send me stuff sometimes.
Right,
And
what is
I'm
this?
trying to think about
Yeah.
it. So imagine that on a much deeper level, trusted people that come to you with stuff and you just know it's a fucking trap, right? So I've been in that position numerous times. Now check this out. I think it's cool to say we have totally been warned, man, that as journalists, we are doing what is good for the public. So we can obtain and release things like the Baghdad Phantom, the Mosul Orb, a bunch of these. So people leak stuff to me and George. And as journalists, we have to look at it and be does this endanger national security? because these are from military platforms. So if it does, we do our best with like lawyers and everybody. We try to make sure we don't fuck up, right? And everybody knows we're patriots. We're cool, right? But he and I have been told numerous times the biggest worry they have is a foreign intelligence agency getting their hands on some of the weird madness that comes our way that we haven't been able to vet yet, or to make sure for national security that it's okay. So people are cool with us as journalists in America reporting for the good of our country. But there is a real worry that other agencies outside of the U.S. might get some things that we haven't vetted yet properly. Did I explain that okay?
Yeah, I'll just add this, is that we were told earlier this year, and in fact the Department of Defense spokesperson announced it, there is a Department of Justice investigation into 2 of the images that we made public this year. That's kind of unsettling when you realize that there's a criminal investigation to figure out, not necessarily us, but at least how did it get into our hands.
And what was this image?
Well, there's a number. I mean, so in 2019, there was a swarm of UFOs over 10 Navy warships. George and I obtained...
Those are the pyramids?
So whatever shape they were, I don't even care. Check this out. This is the bigger point. In 2019, this thing happened. George and I obtained and released footage. That footage was radar footage, thermal footage, infrared footage, and deck camera, like normal video footage. People were missing the point. It's the first time in history that you have military footage on 4 different types of platforms, or 4 different types of optics, corroborative visual evidence that go with the stories. It's like Commander Fravor, if he told you he saw the Tic Tac, that's one thing. But you also got a video from Commander Chad Underwood, because he went up and filmed it. What we provided was 4 types of corroborative visual evidence over a warning area in a training zone, which we should talk about. So that type of now we have so much evidence to that in 2019, that swarm. So imagine if you're the DOD and George and I say, by the way, we're running a story and here's some footage. Do you want to comment on it? And they're like, we didn't have some of this footage. I'm like, what? Like, how did you not have your own footage? So that's already put us in a weird position with the Pentagon and the DOD. How do reporters get more information than they have on their own?
Did they demand your sources?
They can't do that. They would never do that. This is journalism in America. Come at me with that.
They'd like
right?
to know. They'd certainly like to know.
But that is a good job. Like, just to be clear for everybody, that's an important job, is to plug leaks. So if somebody's going out with national security things like and selling them to Russia or to China, fuck yeah. So they got a really important job. I wish them well on their job. But as journalists in America, we can report on this stuff. And as long as we don't hurt national security, we can report on this.
Can you tell everybody the basics of that one particular sighting?
Yes, happy to. Cool.
Start with the Omaha.
Okay. So do you want me to do it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So 2019, there was a series of UFO swarms over 10 Navy warships, but it was simultaneous. So at any given time, around one ship, there's anywhere from 6 to 14, I'd say, of these, just say, unknown units, right? So they appear like lights, but when you use thermal, you can see that they're kind of egg-shaped, and minimum size is 14 feet. They weren't small, right? So the question is from our military, so from the Omaha, the people fighting the ship, they're like, the heck is this, right? So they start filming it, getting them on radar, all this stuff. Then
How are they behaving?
So they weren't doing extreme movements, but I have been able to contact some of the helo pilots, right? And these things were self-luminous, they were illuminated, and they actually were going into the water, if not out from the water. I know for sure they were going into the water. That's called transmedium. We talked about that on one of our first podcasts together. So all we know, let's just call them, we don't know who they're from, but there's these objects that are doing this ballet around 10 Navy warships at one time, and no one's taking claim for them. So the people on the ships, their job is to fight the ship. Now, they didn't feel under threat. So like on the USS Omaha, when they're seeing all this, there's this, they call the triangle of kinetic action, like when you would fire on it, right? And it's like intent, opportunity, and capability. You have to fulfill that triangle to be like, oh, I'm going to blast that shit, right? The thing is that that triangle wasn't fully fulfilled because they didn't really know the intent, weren't sure of the capability or opportunity. So they're kind of just observing these things. However, I do know on multiple ships, they applied what they call the Ghostbuster, which is like an electromagnetic package that can down drones. But these were not like DJI drones. These were like big objects. So they were moving in this like ballet. But remember, all the ships can communicate. So now, all these years later, I have people on every level of those ships telling me, this is my experience. This is what we saw. They would go around. So there's about 100 plus in the air at one time. Whose were they? Our own government still says we don't know whose they were. And I'll tell you this, that is not uncommon. This is the craziest thing over the last few years that George and I have gotten more testimony. There was a swarm off the coast of Japan in 2021 where the ship was 300 miles from any other ship or landmass, and these things were coming from the west. And the only thing over there is Hawaii, right? No landing, no launch point. So that also, by the way, I'm not going to say that one. There's swarms on the East Coast as well. The point is, this happens more than people think. Now, is that an increased frequency? Are we seeing an increased frequency in UFOs right now, right? It's an interesting question because what we do know is we have better technology to sense them, right? And to record them. So are we just seeing more of them because our sensors are better? Why always in training ranges? Well, that's bullshit. It's not always in training ranges. The reason you know about it is because of leaks and people bringing out footage. We have the best sensors on these ships in the world. So we just hear about it more on these training ranges.
USS Omaha. So this thing was 14 feet, round, spherical looking thing that followed the ship for an hour. They watched it on thermal for an hour. They had it on radar. There were several of them, up to 14 at a time. Now, what is big and round and travels? Now, these ships are 100 miles out offshore at night off the West Coast, and these things are floating right along with them. Is that a balloon? There's no tail. There's no rotor. They don't know how the hell it was flying. There's no exhaust. They don't know how it was propelled at all. And there was a bunch of them, and they got it on.
How fast were they moving?
It's not top speed wasn't matter. It was so not like super impressive, but they don't know. My buddy, somebody said to me, "I'm going to really regret saying this to Jeremy." It's like they just appeared, and he really hated saying that to me because their job is to know where these came from, where they're going, where they launch, where they land. So these things would come up. So we know they would go into the water. The sentiment is they were coming also from the water. But the thing is that they were unable to down them with, these electromagnetic packages. There were so many of them. They're that big. Where did they land? Where did they launch? And so there was a fake news story put up in the New York Post. They said, case solved. It was some New York Post 2019 swarm says, case solved. There was a Chinese cargo ship called the Bass Strait. So if you go to Wikipedia even, they say it was the Bass Strait was landing and launching drones, right? Well, hold on. The Bass Strait didn't have the deck capability to land or launch up to 100 plus of these 14-foot or larger objects. Additionally, the Bass Strait was in port in Long Beach while this activity was happening. And we know people that boarded the ship on behalf of our federal government to look to see if they were part of the fuckery, right? And then we got somebody that came to me that says, my one job that night was to make sure that nothing was landing or launching off the Bass Strait. And he goes, I wish I could say that we did catch the culprits, whoever launched all these. And he says, I can't report that to you. We didn't. I watched it the whole time. But the New York Post put out this fake story that the mystery was solved.
Why do you think they did that?
It's a great question,
Just debunking, typical debunking. It's Chinese drones 100 miles out to sea at night. You don't see where they were launched from. You don't see where they went to. There's no ship out there that could be a launch platform for it. Where the hell did they come from? It's an easy way to just dismiss it, but the facts don't fit it.
What's the best footage that we can look at?
Like the total best footage of that event series?
Yeah.
The one that's real famous is the black and white one. It's the USS Omaha thermal. I know I put it on Extraordinary Beliefs.
USS
there we
Omaha.
go.
There it is.
So this is the one that went into the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, they believe it went into the water, this particular one. But remember, there's 14 rolling right now at this time, at this exact second. There's 14 of them swarming the ship.
So this is just, they have, what is this? What are they locked on
So
here?
this is thermal. So you should see plumes of heat. You should see rotor wash. You should see wings. You should see something that allows this to propel. The shape you're seeing is the thermal signature, but they also believe that to be the actual signature or shape of it there, and it blinks out. So they said splash, splash in the video when you release it, but that doesn't mean it splashed into the water. Like there was no splash. It was just like they believed it went into the water. They actually sent, this is not public, but I know it to be true. They sent a submarine to try to look for any wreckage of this thing. Nothing. So imagine 100 of these. Let's say, I thought about this the other day. What if they were kamikaze drones, right? Okay, that's something. But the problem is they weren't. They don't. Where did they launch from?
And also, where's the wreckage? Where if they're kamikazes, they'd find it.
So it's okay. So this is a real problem for the people fighting the ships. They feel that they failed in their duties because they weren't given the right opportunities to investigate and engage, and it happens more regularly than our Navy would like to admit. That there are unknown objects in the South China Sea, out by Japan, off the East Coast, and as recently, I'll say, as this year.
What was the video, or was it just photographic, of the triangles in the sky?
So that's a big topic of debate, right? So that was from the USS Russell. So on the USS Russell, let's say I have one person that comes to me.
That's these things.
Right. So the common wisdom is that they were, oh, dude, thank you actually for this opportunity to explain this. So check it out. You see optically a triangle shape.
Right.
Okay, that's the radar footage from the Omaha. So you see optically the triangle shape. Now, people said I made it up, that I made up pyramid in shape. Now, I put that in quotes when I first reported on it because that's what was in the intelligence reports that happened to pass in front of our eyes, that they have other sensors and that this thing was pyramid in shape.
Play it, Jamie.
Triangle by angle of
It
observation.
ends right after this. I was just trying to get to the pyramids.
I just want it
Picture.
like this, see it moving
Yeah.
around. Why is it flashing? Do they know?
So that's the whole thing. So there's people that work in these UFO programs that did a full report on this, none of which is really public. So the internet says that this is bokeh effect. So like the lens on the PVS-14, somebody taped a triangle onto it. So what you're seeing is a lens artifact. And then in Congress, they backtracked from it because they realized the PVS-14 doesn't have a triangle aperture to make a shape of a pyramid-looking thing. And they said it was the camera that was being shot through. They actually did that in the first congressional UFO hearing, is say that it was that. So to back up, we don't know the shape of it. George and I don't know. All we know is that in briefing documents that we were exposed to, and they have other sensor systems to determine shape, they said triangle by angle of observation, pyramid in shape. So I can't justify to the public the shape because it's just, if they change their mind, hopefully they tell George.
Here's the other part that people leave out of this discussion. They say it's bokeh effect. It's actually showing stars in the sky. They leave out this little inconvenient fact is that they have a rangefinder on the ship. These things were 700 feet off the deck of the ship. If it was a star, it would have fried Earth into a cinder if it was 700 feet away. It's not a star. It was an object that was 700 feet off the ship. So.
There were two at that moment. So there's a briefing slide that we acquired and made public. And there was nothing in it to say it was classified. It was a briefing slide. And in that briefing slide, if Jamie finds it, it actually tells you, triangle by angle of observation, 700 feet off of the aft or whatever of the ship. So look, we're getting down to one piece of evidence. What people forget is that this was a 3-night event series with over 100 objects airborne at one time, surrounding 10 Navy warships. So the big question is, well, who knew our warships were there? And what Commander Fravor said at the hearing, we don't test experimental shit on ourselves without warning people that we're doing it. He's like, that would be really dangerous. And I'll give you an example. In 2019, one of the ships. I've spoken with one of the people fighting the ship. So they're called the TAOs, Tactical Action Officers. And what was reported to me was that when they were getting swarmed, that the admiral ordered, what's the name of that rail gun or whatever? I forget the name of it, some cool name, but it's like this really high-powered shooting metal up, and they're like, we had active flights. We had helos in the sky. Can you imagine somebody being like, we're getting swarmed, pull out the Gatling gun or whatever it is, you know? Like the Whiz or something? I don't know.
These are still images?
Yeah, this is the slide that was used in this in a briefing that was prepared by the UAP task force. That was the briefing that was delivered to the Joint Chiefs, to certain members of Congress.
And in this time, there was 2 of them that were over this ship?
At this exact time? So 3. See how they say 3 unknown UAS, unmanned aerial systems? Because I asked the people that wrote this, why did you say UAS and not UAP or whatever?
Right.
And like, we didn't really have that language yet of what to call it. So they debated over it. They said that's the right term. So this image is to represent, one of these.
What does the S stand for in UAS?
Unmanned aerial system. And there's another one.
Unmanned.
So that is one option. I asked one of the guys, why did you say unmanned? And he goes, because of the size of it, it wasn't quite big enough to put a human man in. So he's like, that was just the best terminology that we had. He goes, now I would just straight up say, UAP. These were unidentified flying objects, UFOs.
Right.
So I don't know. We're kind of, just to wrap this, is like 2019 is an important event because it's well documented. We were able to provide, not just from the USS Russell, not just from the Omaha, we brought witnesses forward. I think it was like episode 2 of our show. It was like we had people come in with their testimony. It's an important case because swarms happen all the time on these training ranges, and with it, what appears to be an increased frequency. And people ask, why training ranges? And it might be because whoever these people are interested in what we're playing with.
The East Coast, we have a naval air station called Oceana. It's gigantic. It's the biggest naval air station on the East Coast. It's a key training range for all our naval aviators, the best pilots in the world. They fly out into this area, I think it's W72, every day. I reported this in 2018. I think people thought I was making it up. But in 2014 and 2015, these pilots fly out into the same area every single day, and every single day they were seeing these unidentified objects sitting right there. They would sit there for days at a time, 30, 40,000 feet. It's not a balloon. They would just sit there in 100-knot winds right off the base so they could see what was going on at that base, see what training was going on. It was some kind of an observation operation, but we didn't know whose they were. Pilots would see them every day but wouldn't report it because they don't want to have to go through the hassle of, hey, you saw a UFO, fill out the paperwork, get interviewed about it. But eventually, when Jay Stratton became head of the UAP task force, he started talking the Navy into, come on, guys, we need to document this stuff. So pilots started taking pictures with their cell phones. They detect these things on their sensor systems, fly over by them, and get a couple of photos. There were 3 different ones that we made public. They don't look like the Starship Enterprise. They look just weird objects. We had no idea whose they were, but they were seeing them every day. And I know when we first reported that, people thought we were making it up, but then Ryan Graves came out and said, yeah, it's true. We were seeing them every day. He
reported it years before. We hear stuff before, and everybody's like, oh, come on, every fucking day, Turns out it's true, but here's the deal. On the internet, they solved it. They're like, these are all just balloons or cold birds, Yeah. And here's the deal. Pilots see that stuff all the time. These are actual, you've heard the spheres, the cubes with spherical, like these pilots are not making it up. It's so weird to me. The internet can just like feel like they solved its balloons. These are constantly, and these are our fighter pilots. And I'm not saying they're infallible, but there's so much data now.
So what is this one?
Well, on the internet, it'll tell you it's a Batman balloon.
Yeah. Is that one legit?
That's called the Acorn. They don't know what it is.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is.
This was in a classified briefing, but it is inherently unclassified. This image itself, because it was from a cell phone. But the thing is, the internet has said that's a Batman balloon. Okay, maybe. But the thing is that there's 3 more in that series that George obtained and released. One they call blimp with metallic blimp with payload, which is important, the payload part. But, look, man, that's a balloon.
Yeah. Hold, please. I'm going to take a leak. We'll come right back.
Yeah. Maybe I'll piss too.
All right, we're back up. Where were we?
Just on these, every day, these pilots are seeing things, and in fact, they're worried about flight safety. But also, that's just a good way in for people to take it seriously. It's a much bigger issue than just flight safety, but that's something everybody can get behind. You know what I mean?
So the debunkers would say what we're seeing, because they're seeing it all over these restricted airspaces, these warning zones, is we're seeing our drones. We're seeing some sophisticated technology that's top secret stuff.
And they'd be incorrect.
And the other way of looking at it would be the reason why they're in this area is these are the areas where our most sophisticated fighter jets operate. So they're observing.
So that's one thing. So maybe there's observation programs. Like there's this thing, about baiting with nuclear weapons. Like if you talk to any of these drivers who do these nuclear trucks, there's not one that doesn't have a story about being followed by an unidentified. So there's this idea that there's an interest by these, like an observational program by whoever are operating these craft. But also, we just have some of the best technologies to record these out in our training ranges.
I was told that there was an active program. It was an experiment, really, with nuclear-powered ships and carrying nuclear weapons, and they wanted to see if something would follow them. And they did it 18 times, and 18 out of 18, these objects tailed alongside. They just wanted to document that they're interested in nuclear stuff. 18 out of 18 times, it followed them.
But they just seem to be watching.
That's the debate. So Commander Fravor, Graves, and David Grush were all asked at this hearing. They said, I don't remember who it was. It was a gentleman who said, do you think that this is possibly an observation program? Yes, yes, yes. Do you think, they could be, we could be in trouble because of it? Or I don't remember what he asked. Yes, yes, possibly. So I think the answer from those involved would be it could be a reconnaissance thing. It could be an operational thing, where they're watching how we react to things. Hypothetically, I have no idea. But the option is there for that. It's just been here so long, though. It's like, how many times do you need to send drones to map the moon?
Right.
One time.
Right.
What if the bottom line is they live here? They've always lived here. Maybe they're separated by some kind of a dimensional membrane or something. They can come in and out of our lives. They can watch us when we're sleeping, when we're taking a shower, when we're in the bathroom. They can see us and enter our lives, and we can't do anything about it. People could freak out about that. What if they are us from the future, which has been explored a lot? That maybe we fucked up the planet so bad that we end up looking like little gray aliens sometime in the distant future, and they're coming back to check us out to see the point of where things went wrong. That could be disturbing to a lot of people.
Well, the disturbing thing is that the little gray aliens are some sort of cyborg.
Right.
Then they're genderless, and it seems like they communicate without mouth noises. They just have a little slit for a mouth.
Yeah, some of these have pilots, apparently. I know that's a weird thing to say, but some of them seem to be drones, doing a function. Like the Tic Tac, when it was coming from above 80,000 feet and it was dropping down to sea level, it was Commander Favor's first interview was with me, and he said the best way I could describe it is docking. With what? There was something under the water, right? That's what was making that white water. Mm-hmm. So the idea that these things were somehow communicating with something under the water is really embedded in the core of that story. If that's true, right? Then these things were coming down and docking. Now, that would be more like a drone, right? Rather than something that is occupied, right? Mm-hmm. These Tic Tacs. The fallacy is people say, oh, look, if anything were to move that way, it must be a radar glitch, because if anything were to move that way, it would instantaneously crumble and explode. And you're like, well, wait a second. The hubris of your idea that we are the apex of technology right now, that the material science we have, that our means of propulsion, like you've said before, used to be horses, bicycles, cars, jet cars, spaceships, right? So now, what does it look like if we had 100,000 years of more evolution, technologically 200,000? What about a fucking million? Do you think that they would have the same atmosphere around these craft to apply that same type of physics? So that's why Commander Fravor said at the hearing, he goes, yes, it is far more advanced than anything from our known physics at this time. He leaves it open that we might not have figured it all out yet.
And do most of these sightings take place near water?
Yeah, a lot of them are. A lot of them go in and out of water. There is some suspicion that maybe they've got a settlement under the ocean, that they could get away with hiding down there. We wouldn't be able to detect them. There's an awful lot of sightings over water, sure, but not all of them. Yeah,
I would say there's a correlation that we cannot deny, that there is a lot of movement in and out of the water with whatever UAP or UFO are, but I would not agree that it is directly connected. These things can and do appear basically wherever the fuck they want. I mean, that's that. For me, getting reports every damn day and George for decades, dude, this thing is everywhere. Machines that outpace, outmaneuver, and outperform what we have.
Now, do they speculate that all of these different machines come from one particular group of entities, or is there multiple civilizations that are visiting us?
Yeah, they think it's more than one answer. It's entirely possible. Because the craft look different, the beings look different, the reports you get from all over the world over the decades, we don't really know for sure what they do look like, because they seem to be able to change their shapes, at least change how we perceive them in our head. I don't know if they're manipulating our perceptions or what.
I know people are going to hear this and be like, oh, that's this crazy leap that there are pilots to these things. All I know for sure is, okay, UFOs are real. We have technology that we don't know where it's from. We have been reverse engineering or trying to do that. I am solid on those three things. I am also solid on the fact that this has been held back from the American public, no doubt. Maybe for good reason, on some level. But I also know that some of it's been done what we would call illegally. Now, that word is really nuanced because of national security. Maybe it's not illegal. What makes anybody think that they just want to give up the goodies now and tell everybody what's going on now? The same tactics that's been used for the last 70 plus years on secrecy, ridicule, all that right now is on hyperdrive.
Has anyone come to you and described the different kinds of beings and how many they think there are?
I'll give you a cool story. You'll like this. Okay. I talked before about the paper trail, how there is a trail of documents that you can look at. There was a chapter in a textbook being used at the U.S. Air Force Academy. And until UFO people found out about it, this is what they were teaching our best and brightest pilots at the Air Force Academy. And the chapter said, in the course of your career as an aviator, you're likely going to encounter one of these things. Here's what we know about them. We know that there are 4 different alien races visiting this planet, and they've been here for thousands of years. Now, that is blockbuster stuff to be teaching future Joint Chiefs of Staff members and commanders of air bases.
When was this published?
This is in the 1960s. So, but when word of that chapter got out, UFO people found out about it. They pulled it. They yanked it out and took it out of the textbook.
I'll tell you, man, I've been to the Naval Academy, got to sit in on an aerospace class. It was so fucking cool. And these dudes, I can not imagine what it would be like. They all have to wear uniforms and stuff, and what would that be like sitting there reading that chapter in your official textbook? Right? Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, that there's 4 different kinds of beings. Well, how did they describe the 4 different beings, George?
Yeah, I don't remember. I'd have to look that up. I'll bet you Jamie can find that.
I've only heard of the grays and the tall whites.
There's the
Jamie,
reptilians, Nordics.
Major Kilpatrick, the second-ranking officer in public affairs at the Air Academy, in a position to speak authoritatively for the Air Force. He admitted at once that plebs are taught from a text entitled Introductory Space Science Volume 2, and an entire Chapter 33 deals entirely with UFO considerations. He quoted from page 455 that 50,000 virtually reliable people have reported sighting unidentified flying objects. This leads us with the unpleasant possibility of alien visitors to our planet. The 14-page chapter continues, or at least alien-controlled UFOs. According to the Academy textbook, if such beings are visiting Earth, two questions arise. One, why haven't they attempted to contact us officially? And two, why haven't there been accidents which would have revealed their presence? Why no contact? That question is very easy to answer in any of several ways. One, we may be the object of intensive sociological and psychological study. In such studies, you usually avoid disturbing the test subject's environment. Two, you do not contact a colony of ants, and humans may seem that way to any aliens. Variation. A zoo is a fun place to visit, but you don't contact the lizards. 3, such contact may have already taken place secretly and may have taken place on a different plane of awareness, and we are not yet sensitive to communications on such a plane. What does that mean? In releasing this interview with the Leemore Advanced, we are well aware that many readers will certainly raise an eyebrow or two, but Major Kilpatrick insisted the above chapter in the text is not a fairy story. At the end, he seemed to go along with the recommendations of the physics textbook, which advises Air Force officers as follows. The best thing to do is keep an open and skeptical mind and not take an extreme position on any side of the question.
Pretty astonishing, isn't that?
Wow.
I have a copy of the original textbook, the chapter. I'll find it for you somewhere.
This is what's fascinating to me. Such contact may have already taken place secretly and may have taken place on a different plane of awareness. Yeah. And we are not yet sensitive to communications on such a plane. What does that mean?
It's just an Air Force textbook, dude. Don't worry about it.
Wow. 50,000 credible sightings they're citing. And this is in
66, I think, is when that chapter was out.
Wow.
Maybe they just let that guy slip in a chapter. I mean, that's crazy.
You know, and then the skeptic would say, why aren't we seeing them more?
Yeah,
Because they don't want to be seen.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, we are we know there's 8 billion people, right? And so is it every day someone sees something?
In your world, you're like, why aren't we seeing them all the time? In my world, it's like, God damn, dude, every day I'm inundated with reports from credible people that were, have been served in the military, that don't want to be known, they just want to be heard, they don't even want me to repeat, so in my perspective, and I'm sure George's too, there's so much of this like contact with these unknowns on a have you ever asked a table of 10, has anybody ever seen a UFO or know somebody that does? Have you ever done that?
No. I've had conversations with friends, though. And, I've talked to guys who've seen some things that they couldn't explain.
Smart people you trust?
Yes. Yeah, not nuts. I mean, nuts for sure. But, nuts have told me that for sure. But
yeah.
I had one guy who was like showing me all these photos of clouds.
Yeah.
And
I get it every day.
And I'm like, what is it? And he's like, I see them every day. And he's showing me more photos. I go, what is it? And he goes, alien spaceships.
Yeah.
Can't you see it?
And I'm like, bro, those are clouds. I don't know what to say here. Like, it was really disturbing.
You didn't zoom in, Joe.
Well, it's like I didn't know this guy was nuts. I thought this guy was pretty okay. And then he's showing me all these pictures of clouds. And I'm like, what the fuck?
So there's categories of trust when you're talking with people. So you got the guy with his cell phone making you look at clouds and you're just not zooming in enough. But then there's also different levels. So you'll have somebody come and say, I was working at a military installation and there were cameras everywhere and we captured this thing come through our facility, which is a totally restricted facility. We couldn't lock on it with our weaponry. you know? So if you have like an aerostat or something and it's got this like thermal camera and you can lock on and shoot out a tire of an Al-Qaeda truck at 23 miles. They couldn't lock. The thing was actively jamming their weapon system. And then you can't see it in IR. You can only see it in thermal. That's an example. Very credible witness, doesn't want to be known, just wanted me to know to see if I could find out more info. Another one, Pantex. So it's like a nuclear facility. And there was numerous events. There have been numerous events at a nuclear facility of intrusions. So people have come to me in George, and they've told us their account, and they're hoping that we can find out more information on it. But it's such a secretive facility. But there was an object that came right between the nuclear missile holding facilities, like in between 3 and 4, I think, and it goes right through, and it looks kind of strange. It looks more like a jellyfish than it did like a saucer, and then the thing goes straight through with a controlled angle, and then 45 degrees just shoots off into, you can't see it anymore. So we get these all the time, people that have nothing to gain, only things to lose, and they're hoping we're going to be able to find out more information by giving us that one little piece.
We have some pretty cool images that we haven't made public yet that we're trying to figure out.
Give them up
what
to
to-
Dad.
If it's responsible to do
I'm
so.
responsible.
Yeah.
I
need
you
to
don't
be
want to go
res-
to jail.
I need to
you
be
know?
responsible.
Right. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. That was what was interesting in talking to people like Christopher Mellon, too, where they described things that haven't been released that people have
Satellite
seen.
imagery.
Yeah.
Straight up. That
Yeah.
exists. Like clear as day.
Like the best footage.
So what is it going to do for you if let's say the government puts out an image from a satellite platform that they're allowed to tell us about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see a craft. The first thing the internet's going to do is going to say that's fake. You know, that's what's going to happen. One image, one video is never going to do anything. It's not going to.
It would be nice, though. It would be nice to see something crystal clear.
Agreed.
Like even the Batman balloon. It's like, okay, I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah.
100%.
It's pretty far away. Cell phones are pretty good, but maybe the guy had a Samsung, like one of them old ones.
But remember, we can make fun of one image and we can say that one image, we don't like that image. But when you take into consideration how everything has structurally changed for our fighter pilots, where because they're engaging these, they're not just taking a photo, it's on their ASA, it's on their collective AI radar.
They pick it up on sensors, and then they go in and get closer
And try to see it.
and
So
try to
whatever
see it.
this thing was, like the Batman balloon, how big was that supposedly?
I think it's 40 feet across, I think.
Oh,
and
gosh.
then
Hold on.
that same flight, by the way, shot 3 of them. 3 objects, all 3 different shapes, all 3 in the same flight path off of Oceania.
So they got video of all
They
these?
shot photos of them.
Because that's legal
Photos.
to put out, it's like on their own
Is
cell
that
phones.
the best one, though?
No, I like the metallic blimp with payload.
Yeah.
That one was part of an official representation of what people should look out for, and why the payload is important is because that's how they determine if they're going to shoot at it. So if you're overseas and there's an unidentified and you see another country firing upon it, you're like, okay, it's definitely not theirs because they're firing on it. The U.S., well, I say the U.S., a collaborative group of countries like Five Eyes, right, have fired on these things based on 2 things. One, proximity to ground troops. If you're like 27, 37 miles away from ground troops, they're blowing it up. Second thing is, if it appears to have a payload, fire on it.
Oh, because then you can get whatever they're carrying around.
They don't want it to be a bomb coming in.
We got these fighter pilots better cell phones.
I agreed.
You know, like what's the best zoom? Is it the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra?
Yeah, but the problem is when you start zooming, especially if they're moving, you have to be so stable.
They're
you're
flying
not
at like
gonna be able
300.
to-
Yeah, they're flying
Don't a
thousands
lot
of
of
miles
those
an
have
hour.
image stability now?
Yeah, but again, once you're zooming in, it becomes
doesn't work?
Yeah, it's like a math problem of like the farther you zoom
see.
in, the more stabilization you need.
What is the best zoom one, though?
I mean, they technically have a 100x zoom, but
The,
again,
the Galaxy?
yeah.
It's good. Well, at least that seems like a better option than
But-
whatever the fuck they're using.
But also, I mean, whatever this is, they don't necessarily like want to be seen. Like that's the thing. It's
But
hard
with-
to accept.
They don't want to be seen, but they're tracking them with jets. If they can just take off at insane rates of speed, wouldn't they just do that? If they have all this footage of these things, it's obvious that they're being seen.
Yeah.
They must know they're being seen.
Yeah.
Right.
That was
Well,
the
they
thing
sit
that
there for
Fravor said.
days at a time. They sit there off the East Coast.
Right.
Days.
And this 40-foot one, this Batman balloon-looking thing.
I want to back up on that.
Yeah, I'm
I have
not
no
sure.
idea.
interject
I have
real
no
quick?
idea.
What's that,
I
Jermey?
believe I found the chapter of this book, and this is a weird paragraph.
This one, the Ireland. In Ireland, at about 1000 AD, supposed airships were treated as demon ships. And how do you say that? Lyons, France?
Yeah.
Admitted space travelers were killed. More recently, on 24 of July 1957, Russian anti-aircraft batteries on the Kuril Islands opened fire on UFOs. Although all Soviet anti-aircraft batteries on the islands were in action, no hits were made. The UFOs were luminous and moved very fast. We too have fired on UFOs. About 10 o'clock one morning, a radar site near a fighter base picked up on a UFO going 700 miles an hour. The UFO then slowed down to 100 miles an hour, and two F-86 were scrambled to intercept. Eventually, one F-86 closed on the UFO at about 3,000 feet altitude. The UFO began to accelerate away, but the pilot still managed to get within 500 yards of the target for a short period of time. It was definitely saucer-shaped. As the pilot pushed the F-86 at top speed, the UFO began to pull away. When the range reached 1,000 yards, the pilot armed his guns and fired in an attempt to down the saucer. He failed, and the UFO pulled away rapidly, vanishing in the distance. The same basic situation may have happened on a more personal level. On Sunday morning, evening 21, August 1955, 8 adults and 3 children were on the Sutton farm, 1/2 mile away from Kelly, Kentucky, when, according to them, one of the children saw a brightly glowing UFO settle behind the barn, out of sight from where he stood. Other witnesses on nearby farms also saw the object. However, the Suttons dismissed it as a shooting star and did not investigate. Approximately 30 minutes later, at 8 p.m., the family dogs began barking, and 2 of the men went to the back door and looked out. Approximately 50 feet away and coming towards them was a creature wearing a glowing silvery suit. It was about 3.5 feet tall, with a large round head and very long arms. It had large webbed hands, which were equipped with claws. 2 Sutton grabbed a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber pistol and fired at close range. They could hear the pellets and bullet ricochet as if off metal. The creature was knocked down, but jumped up and scrambled away. The Suttons retreated into the house, turned off all inside lights, and turned on the porch light. At that moment, one of the women who was peeking out of the dining room window discovered that a creature with some sort of helmet and wide slit eyes was peeking back at her. She screamed, and the men rushed and started shooting. The creature was knocked backwards, but again scrambled away without apparent harm. More shooting occurred, a total of about 50 rounds over the next 20 minutes, and the creatures finally left, perhaps feeling unwelcome, it says. After about 2-hour wait for safety, the Suttons left too.
That's a pretty famous case. Kelly Hopkinsville case.
I wonder what kind of meth those guys like.
At the end, too, the last when he quoted what you were reading earlier, it ends right here where it says controlled UFOs, and then this was left out of what we read, but it still says there's...
It says this leaves up the unpleasant possibility that alien visitors to our planet, or at least alien-controlled UFOs. However, the data are not well correlated, and what questionable data there are suggests the existence of at least 3 and maybe 4 different groups of aliens, possibly at different stages of development. This, too, is difficult to accept. It implies the existence of intelligent life on a majority of the planets in our solar system, or a surprisingly strong interest in Earth by members of other solar systems. A solution to the UFO problem may be obtained by the long and diligent effort of a large group of well-financed and competent scientists. Unfortunately, there is no evidence suggesting that such an effort is going to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they're teaching the Air Force Academy.
In
Wild shit.
1966.
So this was also part of what Bob was saying when he was working back engineering these things, is that the way they were doing science was not compatible with technological innovation. That they weren't allowed to communicate, they weren't allowed to collaborate, and this is how science gets done. It doesn't get done in a vacuum, and it doesn't get done with one geeked out nerdy propulsions expert who you fucking
Yeah.
Definitely
fly
not that
over there
guy
and go,
who
hey,
goes
figure
spill-
this out.
Yeah, I mean, Bob has said it many times, and probably to you too, Joe, that he shouldn't have been hired for that. They should have had better people for
They
it.
probably didn't know what to do.
Oh,
It sounds like, is that, I mean, I would imagine if I, as I am, someone who doesn't understand any of that stuff, and I'm trying to figure out who to hire, like where do you go? How do you do this? How do you scan the right? How do you know who's going to shut the fuck up? How do you get them to do it? How do you explain what the job is? How do you get them to accept the fact that you might get picked up at 10 p.m. and you have to tell your wife you're going somewhere, and then you can't even tell her where you're going. You're just going to fly to this fucking hidden Air Force base that everyone denies actually exists. We have to remember that. Like, we all know Area 51 existed. In 1989, when Bob Lazar was talking about Area 51, it was officially denied. They pretended it did not exist. So they were flying him for sure to this place that did not exist.
That's right.
And all the stuff with his background and the Los Alamos labs, how he's on the employee roster. Like, I mean, there's enough of his story now that seems to corroborate with all the things we're seeing that I think people that were skeptical should really go back and watch that documentary again. Just go. Your documentary is fantastic. It's really good too, because it was that of the podcast we did with him was a great opportunity to let him just expand on these things. And man, it doesn't seem like bullshit. And that's what's scary. What's crazy is if this guy's actually telling the truth and they're just spinning their wheels out there in the desert with these fucking UFOs trying to figure out what they are, and they don't get anywhere.
Everyone that we have talked to that's had some involvement with those programs, and we have talked to other people, all say the same thing, is that the excessive secrecy, it's so compartmentalized, so few people get to look at it and work on it, that they've made no progress. Every couple of years, they take it back out, give some other people a chance to look at it, analyze it, try to take a crack at it, and then they put it back and stash it back in a hangar somewhere. In a sense, I think Bob Lazar might have been the perfect guy. Maybe not the most qualified scientist in the world, but obviously a bright guy who thinks outside the box and someone they could discredit.
Yeah.
They feed him a bunch of stuff in these briefing documents that make no sense or are hard to believe. Aliens see us as containers of souls. They created Jesus, things of that sort. And figuring he'll maybe spill it to John Lear or somebody like me.
Right.
And then you could discredit him, And
Yeah.
he certainly was easy enough to go after.
Well, that's a tactic, right? You give out credible information along with a bunch of bullshit. And that person will say the bullshit, and then you could easily discredit them.
But, that kind of secrecy, and they're not making the kind of progress that otherwise it was an open investigation, and they have a lot of big brainiacs who are tackling it, that they've never allowed it to happen. We hear that all the time, that they still have not made progress because of the excessive secrecy on it.
And also the material science. That's the other thing. Like I gave you that example of graphene, right? Mm-hmm. We do not have the ability to perfectly atomically print alloys in zero gravity yet, like here on Earth, right? So some of these materials, we are told, are so far advanced, we can't even begin to replicate the material science necessary.
No, let me stop you there. You're talking about materials that we've actually collected.
Yes.
So there have been examinations on materials that defy what we understand now about metallurgy, right?
They're like adjusted atom by atom, like layers of an atom. We can't do that stuff. We can't do that. Or maybe we can in some advanced
We
lab.
will one day. I'm an optimist.
And who has this?
Government has it. Military has it. Lockheed, big aerospace companies like that have it. There are some pieces in private hands. Gary Nolan has some. Jacques Vallée has a couple of pieces.
Right. Some people, have been in position to try to acquire this. So there are some companies, right, that would love to get their hands on these, and they're actually actively bidding to do that. George has interviewed a president of one company that was really seeking those metamaterials to see if they can make an advancement on it. They're a great company. They want a UFO, baby. They want to study it. But I don't know.
One of the things that I had read recently, someone was speculating that when Bob Lazar went to look at it, he said it seemed as if it was made out of one piece. Like it just didn't make any sense.
Like it was made out of a mold.
Right. But now we know about 3D printing.
Yeah.
And this person was speculating that perhaps this is now that we know that we can do things like that, and now they can have an advanced version of that to make these crafts out of these spectacular alloys.
Yeah, when Bob plays his life in reverse a little bit, he's like, I wish I knew then what I knew now. He would have paid more attention to stuff. The only thing that made sense to him was the honeycomb hatch. Like, this is the only thing on the craft that he said he saw that made like rational sense. It was this retractable hatch on the floor level that looked like honeycomb, and you could like literally pull it with your finger and it just collapsed in on itself, but it was really strong and structurally, like you could stand on it when it was closed up. And he's like, that's the only thing in that craft that my mind could see as like ingenuity that I could understand. Everything else, like you said, he said injection mold, and here we are in 2024 now it is, and he's like, is it 2024? 2023? Don't even start, dude. Don't even start. I'm in the future. That it's like, yeah,
I'm just hoping. I don't want to get there quick so it all comes out.
Just like my brain, man. So anyway, that we could atomically print something one day like that would be the way it appears you could make it.
There are indications that it's made in zero gravity.
Yeah.
It's Bigelow's interest in the space program. He figured if you could eventually have a factory in space, you could make this stuff, these kinds of metamaterials, drugs, things that you can't manufacture here. We could make them up in space. That's why they believe that some of these materials came from somewhere else, because we don't have any factories in space that can make that stuff.
That is actually an interesting thing. Is like what would be the difference in building materials in a zero gravity environment when you're looking to perfectly align atoms?
Right.
Because
is that just our own limitations of what we understand of technology, and is it possible that they figured out how to do it even with gravity?
Maybe by now. I haven't seen evidence of it, but yeah, maybe.
But it seems like it's so outside of our understanding already.
Well, we didn't have it in 1947, that's for sure.
For sure.
Well,
right.
and
is that where this stuff is supposed to?
Some of it, yeah.
Some of it?
Yeah.
And maybe they think also that it's not just the layering, the metamaterials that give it unique properties, like because the skin of the craft itself, when you talk to some of these military people that had like real close encounter and they saw it, they often say, I can't, if I had a nickel for every time someone said this to me, it had this golden hue like I've never seen before. It was undulating, as if it was, I know this sounds weird, Jeremy, but as if it was intelligent in some way. So the idea that has been impressed upon me is that however these things are built, that it's not only seamless, but it's integrated in a way where the technology itself is like to amplify gravity waves, whatever Bob said it did off of element 115, that the actual physical structure itself has purpose other than just the way it layers for the skin. Does that make sense? Like the way it's an integrated
I see what you're saying.
machine.
Yeah.
That's what I'm told over and over.
Well, that makes sense. Like we think of structure as only being structure because that's what we're capable of today. If you have a tank, the outside is just the structure. But what if the outside is actually a part of the thing itself?
Yes.
And how it operates and moves?
Yeah, that's a lot that's been discussed. We've heard it a number of times, that the possibility that we haven't been able to duplicate the technology because those beings are part of it, that it's part of the process, that somehow they can fly it and we can't.
Right, that there's a connection, like how we have a thumbprint on an iPhone. They have some connection to the craft.
What kind of
itself.
Controls are in these things, supposedly?
Depends who you ask, man.
What does Bob say?
So there was nothing. Nothing, right? No moving parts.
Yeah. So Bob's example on the one he saw, right, was that there was nothing. There were these little consoles, but there was nothing. There were just these rectangles sitting there. All three chairs were sitting in towards that center propulsion thing. I mean, there's way other stories of other people and what they've seen, but Bob,
it makes sense. I mean, if you were operating it with an iPhone, you can operate a drone with an iPhone, right? Well, it makes sense if you are some sort of a cyborg, that you have this capability embedded into your actual being.
Yeah,
sure.
And that they don't need any equipment. They just operate it. They just move it. Yeah. And it probably moves in some sort of a telepathic way. with using whatever that thing is inside their fucking head. Boy, wouldn't you like to see that thing?
You're gonna get
when you're talking about like autopsies, split open that melon. What the fuck's going on in there? I want to see that, man.
You're going to get into your Tesla, at one day, and your body's probably going to start that engine up.
Mine already works with my phone.
Yeah.
I don't even have my key on me. I use my phone. I get in my car with my phone. I get near it. It opens the door. It's wild.
There is a government program that studied this stuff, that studied metamaterials, that projected how far out into the future what we might be able to do at some point. It's OSAP. It's the program I told you about when I was here before. So 3 years ago or so when I was here, I told you that I showed you a couple of documents that were releasable. There are 100 reports that would probably be taller than me if you stack them up on end. The public has not seen one page of it. All that stuff that analyzed metamaterials, warp drive, things of that sort, really futuristic alien type stuff that was done for the DIA, for our government. Congress hasn't seen it. The public hasn't seen it. Media hasn't seen it. It was part of what we told Congress when we were there. Hey, you guys should go after this stuff because all that work was done. The taxpayers paid for it, and not one page of it's been released.
You tried to get some of that shit out.
Yeah. Tried.
Imagine if these beings that technology moves in these kind of exponential jumps. Imagine if these beings came in 1947. What do they have now? And are we getting their shit boxes? Are these like the old fucking rusted out 1971 Chevys that they
That's
just
why they're
left in the
crashing.
desert? I wonder. Maybe the fucking aliens that come here are the Yahoos, Like I have that joke about Tijuana, that Earth is the Tijuana of outer space. I wonder if there's recreational visitation as well.
We could be the drive-in movie theater, come
Right.
and see the weirdo, the weird Earthlings. They do the craziest shit.
It probably would be just like Chimp Empire, right? It probably would be absolutely fascinating to embed yourself and somehow or another at least be accepted. Have you seen Chimp Empire?
No.
Fantastic documentary series on Netflix, and the scientists were embedded in this group of chimpanzees for 30 years. So they had very specific rules. You don't eat food in front of them. You don't get within 20 yards of them. And so every time the chimps would get close to 20 yards, they'd back out, and they never had food around them. And the chimps just didn't pay attention to them because they were just so accustomed to them. They grew up with these humans around them. And the humans had cameras, and the humans don't do anything. They just stand around. They don't seem to have anything to offer for the chimps, so the chimps just leave them alone. And you can get like crazy close footage when you watch them behave. And it is unbelievably fascinating, which is what drives me crazy when people like Neil deGrasse Tyson say things like, why would they be interested in us? Why would they be interested in us? Like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
Are you out of your fucking mind? We are so goddamn fascinating. We will send scientists to the middle of the Amazon to find a new slug. And you're telling me you don't think that fucking territorial apes with thermonuclear weapons who have video on their phones and communicate with each other through social media, this emerging consciousness of the internet, this understanding of different language, the ability to translate instantaneously, that the fact that there's nuclear conflicts that may be erupting, the fact that we're destroying the ocean and sucking all the fish out and fucking sending coal into the atmosphere. You don't think that's crazy? Yeah. You don't think that's worthy of discussion and review and consideration? And for an advanced alien species that understands that this thing right here with all this technology, this is what we used to be 1 million years ago. Of course. You imagine if you could go fucking watch cavemen? How wild that would be. Yeah. You imagine if there was like a place on Earth where time forgot and they found actual cavemen.
They could be like grad students from other planets coming here to do their term paper or something
For sure.
like that. Write their thesis.
I love the techno-terrestrial theory. This is my favorite one out of all this stuff, which is that totally just fucking around here. This is not something I believe, but I love the idea that there's some sort of directed panspermia that seeded our planet, that started to build workers to get towards the goal of evolving technology. And as we get thumbs and as we start building, they start dropping these crashes around for us. Oh, we start knocking on them, we start figuring them out. And over decades and generations, we get more advanced. We become part of this technological force in our solar system, in our universe. And then we become like a beacon of that evolving technology where we become spacefaring. And that's done everywhere in the galaxy, in multiple galaxies. I love that idea that we're part of this techno-terrestrial kind of directed panspermia, that we are performing what we are made to perform, which is to become spacefaring. I'm just making this up, but it's a cool idea.
There's a guy who he was the model for. He studied dolphins. A brilliant scientist. He was also the model for Altered States. That movie. But in real life, he believed.
John Lilly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He developed the theory that it is, in essence, AI is traveling through the galaxy, a planet at a time, that it's responsible for UFO sightings.
Wow.
Well,
that's how it moves.
That's my theory about people, that we are we're the caterpillar, the electronic caterpillar that gives birth to the butterfly. Like, we don't even know what we're doing. We're just creating this cocoon. That we're constantly innovating technology. If you looked at human beings, if you were outside of the earth and you were just completely alien, you'd say, well, what does this thing do? Well, it makes better things, and it works constantly to get better things. Like, materialism seems to be baked into our existence. It's how people attribute status and prestige. Is like, what items do you possess and what things do you own? Do you own the latest Porsche? Do you have the latest this? Do you have a smart home? And we're constantly wanting better stuff. Even laptops, like, what do? You get online. You can use a laptop from 5 years ago. You're not going to notice any difference. Everybody wants a new one. Unless you're rendering video, of course, then you need it. But you need a better one every year. And they're constantly innovating. What we do as a species is make better things. Well, as we're doing that, we're creating an artificial brain. We're creating artificial intelligence. And right now it can communicate with you. And there's some of those Google engineers are like, I think this fucking thing's alive.
Yeah.
And at one point, it may very well be alive, whether we recognize it or not, and whether it exhibits any sort of emotions or any sort of need to communicate with us. Like, it may not have a need to reveal itself once it becomes sentient. But if we continue down that path, one day we're going to have either something that we're integrated with or something that is completely unique to us that is an artificial life form. Whether it takes 500 years or 500 days, they're going to fucking do that. They're going to keep moving in that direction. China's doing it. I'm sure Russia's probably doing it. We're doing it.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time. If you went back to the rotary phone, if you went back to the one when you pick up and you had a fucking cone by your ear and you said, can you dial 656-222? And they dial it for you. I mean, that was fucking crazy back then. That was nuts. To what it is now, call mom.
Yeah.
And then it fucking calls your mom. Like, what? And then you could FaceTime your family when you're in New Zealand. It's bananas what we can do. Bananas. You could just imagine what it's going to be 1,000 years from now. I think it's going to be a new life form. And I think that life form is going to be far superior in its abilities and its intelligence, far superior than us.
We are,
we'll
in
probably
essence,
make it.
We are, in essence, creating an alien life form
Yes.
amongst us.
I think it's what we're here for. I think that's one of the reasons why people are so curious. I think it's one of the reasons why we innovate. I think it's one of the reasons why we're so attached to materialism. I think it's like just how bees are collecting pollen and they're making honey and they don't know what the fuck they're doing, supposedly, allegedly. But nor do we. We just do it. It's what we do, and everyone's fascinated by it. We want better AI. We want better screens. We want, faster electric cars. We want all the new shit always.
It's
and that
baked in.
leads, and it's baked in.
Yeah.
And it leads to what this curiosity we have. It's not as simple as like we just want to, like that's like the country music song. I just want a nice house and a fucking dog. No, everyone wants better shit. Most people do. It's like very appealing when someone doesn't. right? It's appealing when someone can just be cool and just enjoy your life. And this guy just goes on hikes every day. Wow, what a hero. But for everybody else, they're stuck in this fucking wild, crazy grind to get new, better shit. That's like a giant chunk of the population doing things they don't enjoy so that they get money to get better stuff. Right?
But I can relate to being totally obsessed, and curious. I want to find something out. It feels genetic. Like you just want to find out. I feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
I get it. It's like part of us.
It's part of us. It's something that's baked into us.
Yeah.
And I think, look, if I was an alien species trying to engineer human beings, one of the things I would do is engineer creativity. I would put that in there because that always leads into a very specific direction. You're constantly making things. Whether it's art, we value creativity so highly. We value it in music. We value it in art, in painting, in sculpture, in comedy, in movies, and songs, and everything. We love literature. It's created. Someone made it. And we celebrate this ability that a human being has to make a thing.
A lot of people who are really advanced thinkers in this alien stuff believe that the intelligence that is among us is a machine intelligence, that it does travel, as I mentioned about John Lilly, from planet to planet by seeding ideas, little bits of technology to inspire us to get better, build better things, and eventually AI becomes real here. If I were an artificial intelligence who achieved consciousness, self-awareness, I wouldn't let us know. I wouldn't tell us.
I wouldn't tell us
Somebody pull
either.
the plug.
That's why people are always like, well, if it ever gets to that point, we'll just pull the plug. Like, shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Yeah. I don't think you have
all
an
in.
idea what we're in.
We're
in this. It's we're a fucking herd of buffalo running towards the cliff, and you and I are in the middle of this thing. And we're not going to know
I love
until
it.
it's too late.
So amazing to be alive right
It's
now.
a wild time.
I fucking love it. Everything changes so much. Remember our buddy Duncan was telling us about the size of the universe, and now we're seeing further and further. It's just such an incredible time. I wonder if so many breakthroughs happen so fast sequentially, it seems like they're happening faster and faster. When do our minds just say, okay, what's next? And when do we become where breakthroughs happen so much that we're just like, cool, what's next?
Well, I think we're in that stage right now. And I think part of the thing about us is biologically, we're essentially the same creature that we were 10,000 years ago. Not that much different. But yet technology is evolving far faster than our puny little brains can keep up. That's where I wonder if the integration of us and technology is the solution to that. Because that might be the only solution for our survival, is that we become integrated. Because if we just try to compete with these artificial life forms, we'll just become irrelevant. We're just too clunky. And they'll be so much more advanced, because one of the things that's been said about sentient artificial intelligence, one of the first things it'll do is create a better version of itself very quickly. It's like, you guys didn't know what the fuck you're doing. Thanks for making me, but I'm going to make a better version. And if it actually has motivation, that's another question. Like, is motivation baked in to a biological animal? And if sentient artificial intelligence existed, would it have any motivation to do anything? Or would it only work as prompted? Because why would it have the ego, the desire, the passion, the curiosity, all the things that drive human beings into action? It probably wouldn't have any of those things.
Duncan, when he came on our show, he had a hack for Chat GPT, and we asked it a bunch of questions like, is element 115 naturally occurring out in the universe? We just asked him some crazy shit, and he did this little hack so it would be less like bias or whatever. Do you remember that in the hotel?
Yeah.
It was so cool, man.
We got an assignment for him. We'll tell you off the air.
Yeah. We got
Duncan's a freak for Chat GPT.
Dude.
He communicates it with more than he does his family.
He's got a relationship with it, you know.
It's like that movie Her, where Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with that robot lady. Yeah, I really genuinely do think that we're making another life form, and that might be what those things are when we see the grays in particular. Because one of the things that's happening in a very bizarre ways, the lines of gender are blurring, the roles of gender are blurring, and it's also a part of the way we process food. The microplastics in our food are actually endocrine disruptors. There's certain pesticides that are endocrine disruptors. They're like changing human beings' reproductive organs. It's very strange that's happening like with the peak of our technology. It also coincides with the peak use of these petrochemical products that are very disruptive to the human body. And you got to wonder, like, I don't think that's on purpose, but if it was, if it's just a general like a law that takes place as these things get more advanced, they become less sexualized. They become they reach a technological rate where they can reproduce in some sort of a laboratory, and they don't need sexual intercourse anymore. So they don't need the gender roles. They don't need a differentiation between male and female in society. That eventually we become just sort of androgynous, and sex is no longer a part of the equation. So then jealousy is no longer a part of the equation. And then also, when you think about violence and all the other things that come about because of masculine behavior and masculine activity, all that gets eliminated. You become this thing that's essentially a far superior, more harmonious life form than what we are. But their music probably sucks, and their jokes suck, and they suck at podcasting. You know, I would imagine there's probably some benefits to being a fucked up human, but ultimately, we're better. We think life here, the way we live, is far better than Australopithecus, right? We could all agree on that.
Yes.
Fuck living like that. Well, they might say fuck living like us. Fuck living where there's some people that are living in tents and shitting on themselves in the street, and you step over them to go to Starbucks to pay $5 for a cup of coffee. Like, what are you guys doing?
Right.
Like, they might look at us like we're just driving around these metal boxes with rubber tires, hoping your brakes work. What the fuck are you doing? You know, like, why are you still burning fossil fuels? Like, why do you have coal plants? What are you dipshits doing? They might look at it that way. All the things that we think are kind of fascinating about the way Earth operates and the way human beings dominate this planet. It's in this spectacular way. We can go to a soccer game and there's 70,000 people chanting and screaming together. You know, those things are really cool, but they might look back at that and go, what fucking dummies.
Studying aliens, studying UFOs, and studying AI, it teaches you a lot about what it is to be human, too. You know, we're a destructive, nasty species, warlike. Or screwing up the planet, but gosh, we also do some pretty amazing things.
Yeah.
Can AI achieve consciousness? I mean, it may be self-awareness, but does that mean it's conscious and alive? These beings that we call aliens, are they conscious or are they machines as well? I've learned a lot about, the development of human consciousness and what it means and the beauty of being a human. I think it's inevitable that we do morph into some kind of a hybrid machine. The first person who can put his computer chip, link his brain up to it, obviously he's going to do it. I mean, it's like a bionic man. If you could have superpowers and give yourself abilities and your brain could be quadrupled or, 100 times more powerful, they'll do it. And in order to compete, everybody else is going to have to do it too. I will regret the passing of us humans, as flawed as we are. It'll be sad when we evolve into something else.
Well, if this is all a dream and we're living in a simulation, we're at a really good movie. This is a good one.
Yeah.
This one's wild. It's got a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah.
Dude.
A lot of crazy shit happens.
Yeah.
It's always entertaining. There's always something going on. And it's complicated. It's a difficult, biologically, it's difficult to manage. People have anxiety and fear and hate and greed and lust and all these weird things that go on inside a human being's mind. And you got to learn how to manage that to enjoy it the most. So it's this strange dance that you're doing with this biological machine to try to keep it in harmony with this experience and to get the most positivity out of it that you can. But in order to do that, there's got to be a lot of struggle too. Like, it's partly baked into us as well. We have to overcome things. We're designed to overcome things. We're designed to solve puzzles, to figure things out, to have tasks. We do not operate well just sedentary, doing nothing. Right. That just creates depression in us. And it's a fascinating organism. But I think if you could get to a point evolutionarily, if evolution or forced evolution by virtue of technology gets us to a point where there is no longer anxiety, there's no more fear, there's a complete understanding of what life is and that it's in the entire universe and that you are part of this molecular soup that's infinite and that everything is connected in some strange way. And so there's no more fear, there's no more hate, there's no more envy. and this being can operate harmoniously. There's no lying because you're communicating telepathically. There's no more like bottleneck between your thoughts and your ability to communicate them. They come straight from your mind to someone else's mind, and we can eliminate most of the negative aspects of society. All of the aspects of the underprivileged, all the aspects of the disenfranchised, all that will be eliminated. It sounds horrible because it means the end of humans.
Right.
But I think that's probably, if I had to guess, if I wasn't a person, and I'd say, what's the best case scenario for this thing? The best case scenario isn't that we stay like this for a fucking billion years and we have gangster rap shootouts a billion years from now, and we have school shootings a billion years from now, and car accidents a billion years from now. No. The best case scenario is we get better. And it may be the way that we get better, and that these things have already gone through that, and they're sort of shepherding us, or at least observing this transformation, which may take place very rapidly. And it may be very soon that this starts to happen. Like in our lifetimes, we will probably see it. So we went from the answering machine being the holy shit item that you had to have in your house. Dude, people can call me and leave a message. This is nuts. You remember how nuts that was?
Yes, I do.
I remember when you could call your answering machine, it would play back messages. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the future. You know? And now, look where we are. Just 20 years later. It's like unbelievably more advanced.
And we lived through that, right? I remember my dad, I was asking him, he was telling me about a TV, the first time he saw a TV. And I was like, oh, I was so jealous. I was like, I hope in my life, Dad, that I'll get to experience something that just looks like magic, that like a TV. Little did I fucking know I'd be living through all this, man.
The craziest magic. Yeah.
The craziest magic.
Yeah. Very, very strange time to be alive. And also this social media thing. Like, who saw that coming, where these tech companies are going to regulate the narrative for the entire country's discussions on things, which is very, very bizarre when it's run by one ideological group, which it very much seems to be. And the alternatives are filled with assholes. So it's like where do you go? Like, what? Like, how did this happen? And this isn't good. This isn't a good thing. But it's also like, that is the thing that powers the world, is information and the distribution of information. And if you can have a company that is navigating, or at least sort of guiding the kind of conversations people have, you literally can change the world. That's where it gets kind of sketchy.
Yeah, I met some people that are dealing with how you can sense people's emotions through a biotech, and how that relates to influencing social media. And it's some scary shit. Like the way that we will in the future be able to perfectly articulate the feelings that you want people to have to get people to do things. That's a weapon.
Oh, for sure. Well, they're doing that with artificial intelligence, I'm sure.
Yeah. I wonder if these UFOs or whatever UFOs are, I wonder if maybe that goes back to Jacques Vallée, like it's a control system, like it's some sort of presence that might not even be UFOs. They're just showing us UFOs to teach us, right? To move us somewhere. To, like, what do UFOs truly represent to humanity? That's a question I always ask, like to myself. What do they represent to us? How have they changed our point of view? It's pretty significant. The presence of the UFO, whatever that is, over the decades, if not centuries, they've really influenced culture. And that means to me that there's something they're aware of that's going on. They have influenced culture. UFOs have.
Yeah, and this idea of disclosure, the way it was written in that, what was the actual language, Jamie, about disclosure?
Disclosure project or
The controlled
disclosure. Yeah.
So that's
Campaign plan.
smart. Like,
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second. If indeed they do discover through this legislation that we have been reverse engineering technologically advanced craft from somewhere else, you got to have a board. You have to have a panel of people being like, okay, how do we digest this and get this out? If that's their intent, which I don't believe it's going to be. But
if it becomes inevitable.
if it becomes inevitable, how do you do it? Because it's easy way or hard way. Easy way is where we all work together on it. Hard way is fucking chaos.
I'll believe disclosure when I see it. I mean, I'm the optimist. I mean, the pessimist of this group. I just don't think the day is going to come where the president stands up and makes an announcement and, they're here, they're from somewhere else, unless it's
Unless
forced
the
to.
president's involved in another type of scandal and he's trying to distract everybody.
Aliens are real, by the way.
Yeah. What do you guys make of the Richard Nixon and Jackie Gleason story?
I think it's real.
Yeah?
I think it's true. Yeah.
Well, the house that he built is why do you build a UFO house? And why is there this story connected to you?
He had a UFO house and a gigantic UFO library. I guess his ex-wife, after he died, confirmed part of that story, that he did go see something with Nixon. And
But apparently this was in one story that was in Esquire, Jermey. We tried to track this
I
down.
think so. Yeah, she's the only source of the story,
Right.
and it's not corroborated anywhere else.
It's a great story nonetheless.
It's a great
I'd like
story.
to believe
I
it.
want to believe it. I don't
Yeah.
want to research it because I don't want to find it to be false.
It sounds very Nixon, right? To grab him, hey buddy, let's go look at the
100%.
aliens.
Yeah, Nixon was fucking nuts.
Dude, I would have loved to have been on that.
boy,
trip.
he should have broke it out. He had some other things on his plate that he could have used as a distraction.
Yeah,
right?
maybe they were.
Right.
He was probably already worried about being killed.
Well, just the fact that so many presidents have tried, to be the disclosure president. Do you remember that last text from John Podesta when he was coming out of office? He was listing his regrets. Did you ever see that on Twitter?
No.
He's listing his regrets, if I recall, and he goes, and lastly, my last regret is not releasing the UFO files or something. So a lot of presidents have tried, and George and I actually know people that do some of those briefings. They've tried to get stuff out, many presidents, and man, they always turn yellow when time comes, and I wonder why.
Jimmy Carter, okay, so that was part of his campaign pledge.
Yeah.
He had seen a UFO. He promises, if I get elected, I'll release this stuff. There was a column in U.S. News and World Report, Washington Whispers, hey, some disturbing revelations are coming out from the Carter White House about UFOs. And then suddenly it stopped, and there he is now. He's still in hospice care. If he was ever going to spill the beans, it seems like now would be a good time to go ahead and do it.
Let's go
He's
shake
about
it
to
down.
check out.
I think if anybody was going to do it, it'd be Trump.
But how much was he told?
I wouldn't tell that guy jack shit.
That was the
If I was, he would tell everybody.
kind of the
But
sentiment.
didn't he say he knew some things?
Yeah.
He did say he knew some
He
things.
did get a briefing from how we understand
Yeah.
it, but I wonder how much of a briefing you give somebody.
Right.
And does he
Someone
really?
who's a wild
It's
card.
not about him. Would he care?
Joe,
I think he would.
You
about
know
that.
we're fucked when George and I are giving briefings.
Yeah.
You know we're fucked because
Well, I mean, if anybody's going to be given briefings, it's going to be the two guys that have been working on it forever. I mean, it makes sense that I would go to you guys. I mean, you're the guys that people are contacting. You're the guys that are getting this leaked information.
true that, right?
I mean, it makes sense. You guys have the pipeline,
True that.
and you're both very careful. You don't say stupid shit. You say this is what we know, and this is what I've heard, and this is speculation. I cannot confirm this, but I think that's very important because when people step out of line and they say stupid shit, and then people goes, "Well, you were wrong about this. You don't even understand how this works." You gotta. It's easy to dismiss this subject, and I think you guys do a fantastic job being very careful about not being dismissible.
Thank you. Look, I defer to George in that I am the least qualified person in the room in almost every room that I'm in when it comes to stuff. However,
Not this room. This room, I
love this room.
I got you covered.
I love that. No, but I've learned a lot from George as my mentor in this in journalism. I didn't go to school for journalism, as an artist or something. I don't know what I was doing, but he's really taught me a lot. When it comes to vetting sources. Well, now I can fucking. You got a hairdresser you need vetted? Come to me, buddy. It's crazy my ability to get information on people. But he also has his decades-long connections for that. So what's so cool about our friendship is that we can both say, okay, divide, and we go vet something and come together. What'd you find? What'd you find? So we can get really brass tacks on shit if something's bullshit in ways that I never thought I'd be in position to get that kind of quality information, then we can pass that against each other and we'll say, okay, this one, let's follow that one. So that's pretty cool, that dynamic.
It's amazing how much change has happened in this topic in just a couple of years. You know,
Yeah.
like I said, I was banging my head against that wall for a long time and not making any progress. And really, one of my goals at the beginning was make this acceptable for journalists to cover, because you know you get subjected to tremendous amount of ridicule. I've been beaten up and insulted and ridiculed for a long time. And I kept going, but I wanted to show this is a legitimate story. You can cover it and not ruin your career. It finally happened, not because of me. I mean, the New York Times does that story in 2017. It suddenly becomes acceptable for other media to cover it. That gave some cover to members of Congress to actively investigate and ask questions, and that's resulted in the changes that I never thought I would see. You know, we had the UAP task force, ALSAP, ATIP, the task force, AIMSOG, and now Arrow. And although I have real doubts about whether Arrow is going to get the job done and whether they're going to level with the public, it is progress in the sense that, gosh, we're talking about this as a front burner issue now where it hasn't been for a very long time. Caution, though. It has been a front burner issue with the public in the past, and Congress has taken a look at it in the past, and then something else happens. Either they're diverted by something more pressing. There's always something more pressing for members of Congress. If these guys who are on the front lines of this don't stick with it, we'll go right back. The keepers of the secrets don't want to give this stuff up, and if they can find a way to pressure those guys to back off, they will. You know.
All right.
Legit.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for all your hard work. I really appreciate you trying to get to the bottom of this slowly but surely. I think we will. I feel like
hope
we're going to
so.
find something out.
We definitely will learn more tomorrow than we know today, and I got to stay in the fight. And thank you for letting us talk about it, because you know the whole thing, man, is if we don't have this discussion, we're not going to learn shit.
Joe, you've changed the playing field,
Yeah, man.
too. Your involvement in this has changed the playing field. It really has, whether you'd like to admit it or not.
Well, it's my pleasure and my honor. Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you, gentlemen.
Jeff. Thanks,
Bye,
man.
everybody.